How's it going? How we doing? Okay. We will continue our Sculpty Sculpt today. So let me get some of this off. We have to work on the claws.
Just lobbed a message way over Jones's head using some.
So I finished the head. There it is, in all its glory. Now we gotta think about claws, or at least how big the claws are gonna be. I probably will need to mix up some new clay at some point. Luckily, I do have an extra pound. I just don't really want to mix it up. And I'm thinking, maybe more like a crab claw or something. So this would be first joint. Or we can do, we need to make like a medium joint. And then the big claw or whatever. How are we gonna do this? So let's rough it out first in some tin foil, I think. I don't want them too big. What's up, nostalgia? I like a backpack. Backpack? It kind of reminds me of a mushroom. A little bit, yeah, a little bit of mushroom. Mushroomy. Mushroomy. Back cap, back extra arm part, like back here. Big the shell. It's like a, just like a shell, I guess. It's kind of like when you see, what are those? Those, is it like the shrimps or whatever that goes into those shells, makes it their home, and then like, they get bigger and bigger, something like that. Hermit crab. Yeah, hermit crab. Yeah, kind of like that. You gonna give it a weapon or anything? No, gonna give it claws. Something like crab claws, you know? Gotta figure it out. Like, I had a thought today where it'd be like, if I really wanted to take this somewhere and make it like a full on like statue, after the claws, I'd bulk this bottom part up with tinfoil and then kind of make it look like it's walking water and have like a tiny little boat in the water for scale. Like they're like looking up at this thing, like it just popped out and like, holy crap. That's one of the thoughts. It'd be cute. No, he's Menacing. What are you talking about? He's so evil. What are you talking? What are you talking about? Like a little pirate ship. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. I thought that'd be kind of cool. So, like a little. I'm just bulking it up right now, you know? And it would go on like. Do I look different? Do I? I've been growing my beard out. My hair is really messy today. How are you doing? How you doing, Killa? Killa, how you doing? That's it. The beard. Oh, it's my playoff beard. Yeah. You love the. You like the white? Really? That looks so old. So old. But thank you. It's nice. Well, thank you. Thank you. It's a little distinctive. It's a little messy, you know, but you know, what are you gonna do? It's playoff time, baby. Just gotta make sure this kind of looks similar. I think it looks distinguished, but if it bothers you, you can always dye it. I'm gonna dye, it's gonna be purple. Yo, what's up, Van? How's it going, dude? Hey, did I tell you I work with a guy that looks like your doppelganger? Like, it's kind of creepy how much he looks like you. Yo, Van, the bad. Thank you for the gift of tier 1 to Daniel the Soul. Denial Soul. And you may never leave! Get us down here. I know, we have ice cream. Guys of ice cream, yes. Oops. I skipped the wrong part. How you doing, Van? Appreciate that, dude. Thank you. I gotta make... Oh my god, I gotta make 4 of these. Yeah, I gotta make 4 of them. That's ridiculous. Doing good, watching some Doctor Who with your best friend and drinking a pale ale. Life is good. Hi, best friend. That sounds like a nice night. Which Doctor Who? Well, I appreciate you stopping in, man. I appreciate that. Just making a creature. A creature. Rawr. Butter turkey. Mmm. Nice. Starting from the very big, from the 50s? Creating a metal of the art is always started from. Oh, God, I'm like from the 50s. Jeez, that's gonna be a long time, man. I plan to keep creating, so I will. I've never watched Doctor Who. You have to let me know how it's going, how it goes. I've heard a lot of negative stuff about the new season of Doctor Who. Phenomenal. Damn. Phenomenal. Phenomenal. It's high praise. Phenomenal? Phenomenal? Alright, man. Enjoy your show. Have a great night, man. Speaking of Disney and Doctor Who, have you all heard about the new direction Star Wars is heading, and what they did, or are doing, have done, or whatever they've done, they've already done. Oh, I like it too. Thank you. So apparently, with this new Star Wars show, they completely changed all the lore with it. So instead of the Force, it is called the Thread, whatever, right? Where a bunch of lesbian space witches use the Force, or the Thread, to impregnate women. Yeah. You think it's fan fiction, but it's not, unfortunately. So the whole, Anakin, being born without a father and all of that does not matter at all. Yeah. Yeah. Lesbian space witches. I'm like, that can't be right. This has to be fan fiction. So I looked it up and I'm like, oh no, they went that route. So essentially, the Force is female, which the Force shouldn't have. The Force has no gender. It's the Force. It's like a all-knowing force. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's the T. I mean, to be fair, I haven't watched Star Wars since the last movie they did, which was horrible. So I just kind of like, yeah, I haven't really been paying any attention to the new stuff. The Force never had a gen. Yeah, I wonder why they wanted to go that route. Well, they've been pushing that whole the message and trying to pander to certain audiences and exclude the ones that they built up over since the 70s, pretty much. It's what happens when you hire people who don't care about the material and they just want to insert their own ideology into the whole thing. Unfortunately, right? Instead of trying to write good characters and tell good stories, they just insert their own message and bull crap like that. Last movie, it was so dog water. So bad, man. And I was so excited for Star Wars to come back then, but yeah. By trying to be more progressive, they ended up being less progressive. It's like, we're trying to appeal to a modern audience. What? That doesn't make sense. What do you mean a modern audience? You should be trying to appeal to the audience that you already have. Alright? People grew up with it. My goodness. How out of touch are you? Anyways. No, Star Wars died a long time ago for me. Wasn't a fan of movies 7 to 9, yeah. Rogue One was great. Alright? I liked Rogue One. I liked the chick in it. I thought she was really cool. You know, that's how you do a Star Wars movie. And then, you know, if you come out and say, oh, you don't like the new Star Wars stuff, you're homophobic or you're racist. I was one of the few who liked Jar Jar Binks, and then I was out. That was the last movie I liked. Last? Damn. Well, you know, George Lucas did Jar Jar. Star Wars was never like an adult movie, right? It was never an adult series. It was more for kids, right? Jar Jar was there for the kids. And I like Jar Jar because, you know, I watched it as a kid. There, we got 4 claws. Ah. Yeah, once George Lucas sold Star Wars, I was like, oh no. Especially Disney, I'm like, uh-oh. Here we go. Hold on to your hats. So I think I need to make some holes for these. Queen Amidala. I liked Queen Amidala. I liked I like the whole prequel, so it's great. Especially the last one. We'll never get another lightsaber duel like that, man. Oh, that's so good. Queen Amidala, Princess Leia. Chick from Rogue One. Ahsoka. Darth Maul. Like the Grogu. Just visually, he's too cute not to like. I've never seen the show. Avoid the shows. They're... The first season of Mandalorian was really good. But that was pretty much it. Even like Metal Girl was like, this kind of sucks. I'm like, yeah. Yeah, it does. Have you seen Star Wars Visions with all the different anime shorts and various styles? No. I haven't really been into Star Wars for a bit, so even the Marvel stuff I've kind of just fell out of that whole thing. I like the idea of like different styles, art styles. Reminds me of the Dante's Inferno animated movie. What the fuck? Oh my god.
Cliff Bar is deliciously fulfilling. Like reaching the peak, the most important ingredient is you.
Why are there's like so many ads all of a sudden? What's happening? It's like Dante's Inferno, the animated movie. Like each level of hell is like a different animation style. It's really cool. It's really good. If you know Dante's Inferno, like the book. He like has to go through the levels of hell to rescue his beloved Beatrice from Satan. Yeah, yeah. Even the game's really good. Remember they had the game. I think it was like PS3 that when it came out. It's kind of like God of War. Shit was dope. So this is what we're kind of looking like. Crab claws, Senor Crab. Concorate. Okay, so these are the claws. So in the joints here, we're going to build up a second joint, and then the claw will be its own thing. I think that's how crab claw works, right? You know, it might be better to no, it's falling. It's crumbling. Might be better to sculpt these separately off of the armature and then attach them. Attach them afterwards. That way I can hold it. If I need to adjust it, it'll be easier. So that's what we're gonna do. I don't know if I have enough. I don't. This is all the clay I have left of the first batch. This little thing. So I might have to mix up more clay later. We'll see. We shall see. Also, I hooked up a third monitor. And I attached it to my Sculpting desk right here. So I don't have to look at my phone anymore. Pretty exciting, I know. I think I want to have some of these claws like open, you know? Maybe one closed. Have like a dynamic. So I don't want to cover the hole I made. That's what she said. You know, I do like the idea of making this base like water. And then making a little boat or something. I would like 3D print a little boat. Though it'd have to be like small though. It'd have to be like I want this to have like I feel like it would be big, you know, like the scale of this thing to be giant. Like Pacific Rim style. I don't know. Yeah, I'm getting mixed up more here. So we want to make sure that like this the middle part here is pretty thick. And the claw, the upper claw is its own joint as well. Okay. So that's good to know. Oh, like really around this top claw. What does the inside look like? It almost looks like a bird beak. Huh. Interesting. So let's just do the rough outs for all of them, and then we can go in there and bring out the details. And give you claw. Just a rough out. Roughed out. Now we gotta do that 3 more times. How symmetrical are crab claws? They all like the same size? This one's smaller compared to the other one. How was everyone's weekend? I guess I haven't seen you guys since last week. Wait, did I? When did I stream? Oh yeah, I streamed Sunday. I guess, yeah. Feels like forever. I'm just gonna have enough. Weekend was good, nice, nice. What'd you get up to? Did you catch the terrible Oiler game? But looking forward to getting this surgery over next week so I can stop thinking about it. So the two towers. The two towers. Like Lord of the Rings? They're back in theaters? I bet you'll feel a lot better after your surgery. It'll go great. Yeah, I'll need to bulk this out more when I make more clay. There's a special... Damn, dude. I wish our theater here did that. If they were like, yeah, we're gonna show the whole trilogy, I'd be like, I'm down. Hello, work? Yeah, I can't come in today or tomorrow. I'm sick. Oh, dude, I gotta make more clay. Alright. Just do it. So nostalgic. I loved it so much. I've always wanted to go to like those showings where they have like the live orchestra for like the movies. That'd be cool. Over 3 days I was available on 2 times. Oh, okay. So it's like, okay, it's like a daily thing. Eat shit. You have 9 friends? Dude, you have more friends than I do. You have 9 more friends than I do. That would have been fun. It would be epic. I want to. I don't need a lot. I feel like if I cut half of this. This stuff is a lot softer than the other. Chalky. So I need to match the colors. So I did half last time and a half of a. I did full, then a full green. So I might just need to add it like gradually, maybe. Shit. So maybe we just do like a little chunk like that. Little chunk like that. Yeah, this clay is much harder than the other. This stuff. Yeah, I would love to see like the Lord of the Rings with the orchestra. Another one would be like Interstellar. Any Hans Zimmer movie really that he's done. La 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 la. It's like I sneezed. What's your guys' favorite high movie, if you guys do that? If you have a favorite high movie. Or one. Maybe if you do. Interstellar would have to be one of my faves. That shit is just so wild when you're like you're a little spacey, you know? Pun intended. I would say Pirates of the Caribbean with an orchestra. Ooh, that'd be good. Ooh, yeah. It must be the worst pirate I've ever seen. It must be the best pirate I've ever seen. Apparently they're remaking it. That's what I hear. Idle Hands. Idle Hands? Devon Sawa? Yes. Great movie. I think I may have just nailed the color right off the bat. Yeah, they're remaking it apparently. That's what I heard. I think they're doing like a female-led Pirates of the Caribbean. Makes no sense because I thought having a woman at sea back then was bad luck, right? Well, you know Disney, they wanna milk it, you know? It's not gonna be as good, like you want to talk about like iconic characters and iconic performances? Johnny Depp's Jack Sparrow is one of those. So I feel like it's not going to be as good. I mean, remakes are hardly ever as good as the original. Yo, I think I matched it, eh? Ah, I think I matched the color. What? Still need to mix it a bit more, I think. Yo, this stuff is so much more softer, dude. That's crazy. It's crazy how much softer it is. That's okay though. That's It's not. It's. Maybe like a tad more green. But like it's really close. Like it's really close. Might need like a tad more green. Not much. Maybe not even that. Or does it? I can't tell, man. Can't tell. Yeah, a little bit more green. Who wants some pasta? Yum. The Sculpey 3 has a peculiar smell. It's like a rubber. It's like a... It smells familiar. It's something like that. Type of rubber. It's like an industrial rubber smell. Still smells better than Monster Clay Gray. That is a weird smell. It's like a warehouse. Like a concrete warehouse floor smell. Not a fan. I like the material though. I just don't like the smell. If anyone asks, yes, the smell of a clay makes you a better artist, okay? Just facts. I don't even think it's worked in all the way yet. Almost there. So they say if you're using Sculpey 3, you want to mix in like a Sculpey Primo to make it stronger, which gives it more flex and it makes it less likely to shatter or crumble on you when you bake it. Alright, I think as close as it's gonna get. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's what we'll use. Hopefully I made enough. God, shut up. Yeah, this Sculpey is pretty soft. The Primo is just soft. It's just hard enough to do some detail with it, like what it did here. But I think this Sculpey 3 is too soft to do anything like that. So I think it's good that I'm using it just for the claws. So they don't need to be crazy textured. Oh, you want to see like a little miniature I did? You guys want to see a little miniature that I've been working on? And like concept sculpting a little creature. Oh man, eyeball got something in it. Check him out. Ah. It's just a little cutie. Another, I guess, aquatic creature. I'm kind of on like an aquatic creature kick. And right there. So he's watching you guys. Right, this is supposed to be this. The bottom has no joint. It is part of the claw. Where the top is all joint. Shit's crumbly, oh my god. I think once we get just the blocking out of this done, we'll bake them with the heat gun. Because we're kind of like saving the progress, right? And then we'll just kind of add in the detail to the baked piece. Yeah. But I think before we do that, we want to make sure we get the joint part in there. Actually, I could probably no. I don't. I could probably sculpt that separately on top of it. Actually, so I want need a safe place to put these. It's like a butter. Don't need that. I also have like these red and blues and some leftover green and white. I was thinking of like some pretty fine detail, sculpting like mini corals and stuff like that, and attaching it to his like back. That might be kind of cool. Just throwing out ideas, you know? Man, this claw is like really small. Oh my goodness. It's so tiny. Oh baby. I need to add more tinfoil to this one. Yeah. Yo, what's up, assassin? Metal pants. It's hanging pretty erect and up to the left. How about yourself? How's the whole Resident Evil mod going? Stay down there. Stay, motherfucker. That's better. That's better. Just dabbling. AI. I made a pink monster that looks like Frankenstein and sent to you on Discord. Messenger thing. Oh. Oh, interesting. That's like something from like Dragon Ball Z. Learn how to do enemy replacement. I'm not sure what that is. Shit, right. Where's that hole? There it is. That's what he said.
Hi, I'm Dr. Monica Bell, an Alberta optometrist. Eye infection, eye injury? Visit your optometrist. We're doctors trained to diagnose, treat, and prescribe medications.
I don't care.
Our health coverage is available.
You're stupid. No one likes your ads. I'm sorry, but if I go out of my way to avoid oh my god, I'm drawing like fucking your terrible items. If your ad annoys me. So you're all optometrist. Oh, I'd rather go blind than support you. Go away. Oh, Resident Evil 4. Oh, enemy replacement on Resident Evil 4. Okay. That I get. That's pretty cool. Like, so, like, what did you replace the enemies with? Like Angela Anaconda? Millennials know. Hello, my name is Angela. Say hello. Welcome to my very own show. I'll introduce my friends to you. Oh, now it's Ninny Poo. The big chainsaw guy. What do you replace him with? I have like so much green left. This is like the correct color. That's crazy. Do you replace him with the Cookie Monster? It's the Cookie Monster. Cookies, yes. I love cookies. Plays all enemies with big chainsaw guy. Oh, he's usually a mercenary. That's scary. What the fuck? So let's like talk about Resident Evil 4.
You could do SEO smarter and faster. With Wix, you can edit your meta tags page by page, all in one go.
What's with all these fucking... I never had ads last time. All of a sudden, I'm getting all these ads.
And more. Save time.
It's crazy. Right, eat shit. I'm blocking your ads, bitch! Right. Ads from where? On YouTube. They've gotten so much worse. That's ridiculous. Also, check it out. I don't know if anyone was here when I was showing this off, but like I made a little little concept sculpt of a miniature. Another little aquatic monster dude. Couldn't really go too far with this guy just because there's no armature, so he's all clay. And I kept trying to work the legs, but he kept sagging because the clay got too warm. But, yeah. Rah. Yeah, thank you, thank you. Yo, this one's longer than the others. That's okay. Each claw is gonna be different, you know? It is what it is, I guess. I feel it in my mind. I hate ads, and if you do too, you should sub right now to Metal to avoid the... Exactly, you should subscribe to Metal of the Hate. Nope. Of the Horror House. And avoid the ads. I had a brain fart there. That was a big brain fart. We will be doing a new thing shortly for every new subscriber. Not yet. For every new subscriber, we'll be spinning a wheel. Yes, you haven't seen this in a while, have you? With like different types of creatures and monsters and stuff on it. And we'll do that, and then every Friday we'll work on the we'll make like a little miniature of whatever you landed on, and we'll add it to the horror house back there in front, and everyone will have like their own little creature kind of monster, dude. Yeah, that's the idea. One time, out of nowhere, YouTube popped up here to daylight. Really scared ya. Yeah, if you guys have any ideas for like what kind of like monsters or like ideas to go on the wheel, let me know. I got like goblin, a zombie, hag, demon, classic monster, Wendigo, a plant-based, out of this world, insect-like, or viewer's choice, but I have a couple spots open for other things. So, if you have an idea, let me know. I just said that. There's a demon's already on there. If you have any ideas for new things to go on the wheel, sir. Demonic nurse. Demonic. I feel like that falls in with the demon. Also be fun to like practice like miniature sculpting as well. So that's another reason I want to do it. That, and of course give you guys all your own little monsters.
I saw a wrestler female on WWE middle of the ring twerking. What is wrong with WWE? Lol lol, or a blob monster?
I thought, isn't that just like a normal day for the WWE? Things are getting spicy. Is that like her finisher? Just twerks on you? Oh no. Yeah, I'm gonna have to bake this anyways. This stuff is just too soft. Speaking of the WWE, I've heard some like pretty bad things about The Rock. How he's not very professional. Have you guys heard this stuff? Like, he's always like 8 hours late on his movie sets. His new movie, he's cost them $50 million already. He pees in water bottles on set because he refuses to use a public bathroom. He gets his assistants there to like empty it and get rid of it. It's lunacy, man. Like, do we still care about celebrities? I feel like that whole idolizing celebrities, looking up to them, I feel like that's really going out the window. I mean, I don't think you should look up to millionaires anyway, or billionaires, millionaires anyways, but... a good one. I like it. Alright, I need my heat gun. I'm gonna do some baking. I don't need this. Okay. Let's see.
Sometimes the dark side of fate just despises when human
Just some
beings
creepy
are
stories.
relaxing or enjoying themselves. Take these fishing stories, for example. One second you're casting a line, and apparently the next, you might be reeling in the most disturbing moment of your life. Welcome back to Unexplained Encounters. I'm your host, Darkness Prevails, and I'm here to share allegedly true stories of the unexplained from real people like you. And in today's episode, those stories are about scary things seen while fishing and during fishing trips. If you have a story of the unexplained, send it to me at darkstories.org. By the way, you can enjoy this podcast and more scary podcasts like it on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app by simply searching for EerieCast. Now, let's begin. If you see anything, say nothing. From Petrichor. For winter break one year, we packed up and headed to my hometown, a small island in West Asia that is not very well known. There I met my uncle. In fact, this is his encounter, not mine. He'd been at sea ever since he was just around 18. He was 35 when he first told me this. He's seen many things out there. And please do keep in mind that these are his words translated into English. This story is told from his perspective. Winter might be the worst time to be at sea. Even though here it is much warmer than other places. It still gets quite bad, especially for first-time fishermen. But the worst part is that it was squid season, and the deck smells terrible, no matter how much you clean it. Unlike Chinese vessels, we only stay at sea for 45 days, but that doesn't make it any better. Our position changes each time you sign up with the fishing company. But if you're new, it's possible that you were most likely to work as a cook or just cut squid. Regardless of all that, there was always one unsolicited rule. If you see anything, say nothing. That goes for anything out of the ordinary. Because legend has it, there are things that live in the sea that love to be talked about. Of course, when I was new, I didn't know that, but I wish I did. Beyond the deck being stinky, as was usual, when you get homesick as a newbie, trying to spot land makes you feel better somewhat. At least, that was my case. It was near sunset that day, as I recall, but it was already very dark. The deck always made me have a sour expression due to the stench. The sun was completely gone, and it was a little misty at the time. I was kind of frustrated with it all, to be honest. I just wanted to make some cash. At the start, I thought it would be easy. Just cook some food and cut some squid. Can't be that hard. That's what I always told myself before signing up. But there I was. I could only sigh and turn away to keep myself from puking from the smell. Then I heard something. I paused for a second, not sure of what I actually heard. It was like some kind of knocking. The kind of knock you'd hear when someone's in a hurry. I brushed it off as a crewman knocking on the door, even though I knew that knocking on metal doors sounded way different than that. It clearly sounded like hurried, wooden knocks. The knocks made me feel a little scrupulous, because each time I would hear 5 knocks, and when it finished, I thought it would be leaving or gone, only to start again. 5 distinct knocks, the last one always being the strongest. I was curious at the time to see what caused this strange noise. I feared it might be an issue with the vessel. but I wasn't really familiar with the mechanism and structure of it. I was careful not to get too close to the railing, just in case. I inched closer, trying to peek over the edge carefully. I then saw something in my peripheral vision. It didn't look exactly like a fish, but it did look fishy at the same time, if that makes sense. It had no scales, but somehow it looked like it reflected light. It was visible in the barely lit water. It was a distinct silver color, and its body was about 8 feet long. I thought it might have been a big fish of some sort, maybe a shark. But I was proven wrong when I saw what was supposed to be its head. Its head was like a fox with no fur. And its limbs, they weren't tentacles or anything like that. They were human-like limbs, 4 of them. The thing gave off a smell like rusty iron. It was somehow worse than the smell of the deck itself, and I wanted to puke again. And this time, there was no holding it back. I grabbed the iron railing as tightly as I could and let it all out. The heaving made the walls of my stomach burn. I then heard a ringing in my ear. I don't remember what happened after that, but I do remember that the thing was gone next I looked. Now, I wasn't aware of the unspoken rules of these vessels, so as soon as I saw another crewman, I knew I had to pull him to the side and say something. He was an old man and had plenty of years of experience out at sea. I'll call him Ivan. Ivan was usually the captain during the squid fishing season, but he had recently had a head injury and could no longer do that anymore. But he still insisted that he accompany the vessel this season as well. The fishing company knew him well, and out of respect, they fulfilled his request. "Hey, man, I think I saw something," I said. He must have seen how pale I looked. He looked even more concerned. "What's up? You look like you're gonna wet your sheets tonight." Ivan was the kind to always joke, even in the most serious of moments, even if his jokes weren't funny at all. "Well, I saw something in the water. It was silvery and was huge, at least 8 feet. I told him, and he stopped laughing. I saw Ivan's expression harden. He was no longer smiling, no longer revealing his few missing teeth. He looked serious. "It's probably because you're new. Young ones especially tend to imagine things the first time. Just say your prayers and sleep for the night. But before that, find someone who's willing to do cooking duty instead of you." I wasn't imagining things, Ivan, and I've already said a prayer. I'm sure that I saw something in the water, something that wasn't normal. I tried to defend my claims against Ivan. I felt irritable for some reason. My stomach was hurting and growling now that it was empty, which made me even more annoyed. "Listen, I'm not saying you're lying. It's just, you look tired as heck." Ivan's usually friendly tone took a more deep turn. Then his expression looked as if he was scolding me. That night, I didn't feel like myself. All I could think about was that weird silvery thing in the water. No matter how much I tossed and turned in the bed, it didn't work. I just kept thinking about it over and over, and I was irritated at Ivan, a feeling of betrayal of sorts, even though Ivan didn't really do anything wrong. Now, in that vessel, we had no actual beds, just a couple of sheets under our bags, a sheet over us, and an old pillow. Each room was filled with 6 to 8 people, and to my bad luck, most of them were on duty that night and had come back smelling like squids, which is basically a smell of urine. The feeling of unease, combined with that stench in the room, made me get up from my sheets at last and walk towards the door, careful not to step on someone's arms or legs by accident and wake them up. I successfully made my way to the deck. There I found Ivan standing by the railing of the vessel, mumbling something that I could not hear. I didn't get too close to him, but he did stop, and he looked at me. He continued to mumble as he did so. I could hear it better now. It was some sort of prayer, I think. Ivan looked fairly tired. His eyes were red as if he hadn't slept for days. I checked the water myself for the strange thing I saw earlier, as if I was eager or longing to see it again. Are you looking for it? Ivan stopped praying and looked at me, but his eyes were unexplainable, as if he were looking for something behind me, not looking at me. It felt as if I was dreaming. Ivan's bloodshot eyes snapped me awake then. I didn't say anything. I remember feeling a bit embarrassed, actually. I quickly ran back to the squid-smelling room. Something didn't feel right. It was as if everyone knew something and kept me in the dark. Hopefully, it was the last days of the squid season, so I wouldn't have to spend too much time with Ivan on the same vessel, even during cooking duty, or any duty at all. I would avoid him as much as possible. I figured that I would no longer talk to Ivan, at least until we got back to land. But when we did, I was far too tired to do that. I tried not to think about the incident for a week or so. However, the day it came back to me, the day I needed to confront him and ask him about that night, was the day my mom shook me awake and said that old Ivan had died of a heart attack. Now, our island isn't too big. It doesn't have too many towns. It was only natural for people to know each other quite well. The old man, Ivan, was the first person to introduce me to the fishing vessel company, telling me it was the best way to get started with making money. And now he was dead before he could ever teach me much about the sea. On occasion, I think about the thing I saw back in the sea, but that wasn't the last time I saw it. Sometimes I still need money here and there, and I sign up for the same company. And every now and then, I do see that thing in the water again. Even if you see things that are unexplainable, it's important that you act like you never did, and continue on with your duties. I finally then knew the unspoken rule of the vessel. If you see anything, say nothing. It changed us forever. From Mr. Yeetus Faze. My dad and I never saw eye to eye. We'd always get into arguments about small things, and that would impact our relationship. Eventually, our mom would make us socialize. We set up a 3-day camping trip to a beautiful forest with a lot of mountains and lakes for fishing. We have a few things in common, and one of those things is fishing. We were certain that these lakes had some big fish. We said our goodbyes to our family.
Yeah, what's up, fish? How's it going?
It took us about 5 hours to get there. But when we finally did, we were in awe of the scenery. It looked like the place had never been touched by people. Beautiful flowers all around. Mountains just like the postcards. We soon walked down to the lake, and we started to fish. We caught a big old bass and planned to eat it for lunch. When we got back, we set up camp in a clearing. We set up a tent, got a fire going, and had our truck only about 20 feet away. We started to prepare the dinner, the bass, and we noticed the woods at the time were completely quiet. We thought it was because we were here, so ignored it and continued on. When dinner was ready, we dug in. We were very exhausted and hungry from all that fishing a few hours before. Dinner was delicious. After that, we talked for a while. My dad even told me a few stories from his childhood. It was entertaining. Before long, we got sleepy, and we headed to our tent. After about 5 minutes, we were both out. In the morning, we set out to a certain place in the woods that had a lot of deer. We were amazed when we saw at least 5 deer at the spot. We ended up bagging 2 of them and planned to eat good for dinner that night. After a long day of hunting, we headed back to camp. This time the woods were quite noisy compared to the night before. Again, we ignored it, cooking and eating our deer. Once more delicious. Eventually, we were back in our tent, asleep. At around midnight, I woke up to the sound of footsteps a few yards away from my tent. I looked over, seeing that my dad was awake as well. We were both groggy. We grabbed our guns to try and scare or kill the thing that had suddenly intruded on our camp. We soon found where the noises were coming from and began to crawl out of the tent and go in that direction. We lit up the place with flashlights. We saw nothing at first, but then our eyes began to make out a mass of fur, and then it began to move. We aimed our guns and fired. The sounds of gunshots almost deafened me. All of a sudden, that creature turned around, revealing itself. I was amazed it wasn't dead. It had hair missing in places and looked quite muscular. Too muscular to be a typical wolf. Its eyes had a red and yellow tint to it. It then stood on two legs and howled at us. The sound was so unnatural and wrong, and then it ran towards us. My dad, without warning, picked me right up off the ground and bolted towards the truck. We just hopped in, and thank God, Dad had his keys in his pocket. We threw ourselves in the truck, and my dad floored it. We could see the silhouette of the thing chasing us. It even threw a big rock at the cab. We sped until we saw a hotel, and only then did we finally stop. We rushed inside too, paying for a room quickly, and got settled in. It took forever for both of us to get to sleep. Come morning, we went back to the campsite. We found all our things mostly destroyed. Luckily, the important stuff wasn't touched. We packed up and sped away. When we got back home, we simply said our trip didn't go the way we planned. We never really did talk about that night since. However, my dad and I didn't fight as much anymore. We haven't shared this story with anyone else until now. What we encountered that night was anything but normal. Some things feel and look like a dream, but they turn out to be very real and very nightmarish. Out of Place, from Red Scarecrow 99. This story happened around 2021 in the summer. I live in northeast Pennsylvania, about an hour and a half drive to Narrowsburg, New York. It was a normal Sunday, and I had the day off. It had been a scorcher of a day, somewhere in the 90s, the kind of day where the energy was just ripped right out of your body, and the only ambition you have for the day is sitting near the AC. Fish are no different. Pro tip: if it's hot, sticky, and uncomfortable for you, don't even bother with a rod and reel. The fish feel the same way. They become very sluggish and usually hide deeper in the cooler water. I decided to wait and take the kayak out after dinner. The sun had begun its slow decline, and the shadows were getting longer by the second. The night brought with it cool air, and it was going to be a great evening of fishing. Or so I thought, because the fish forgot to RSVP to the party. Cast after cast was met with no bites, and I was about ready to head home as the sunlight dipped below the canopy. I turned the kayak toward the boat launch and started to paddle when I saw movement from the corner of my eye. It's not uncommon to see huge snapping turtles come up for air next to you, but this shape was alien, but not unfamiliar. 30 yards or so from my boat, I saw the dark shape of something long and slim, quite large, skimming the surface. Behind it was an S-shaped wake of waves as it lazily paddled in the same direction I was going. It was getting dark, so I couldn't see it clearly. Then it dawned on me where I'd seen it before. Countless documentaries flooded my mind where I'd seen alligators swimming, and this was what I was looking at. But this one was nearly the size of my 10-foot kayak. You better believe I kicked it into high gear, and I did my best Scooby-Doo bongo run. I'm pretty sure the kayak wasn't even touching the water, I was going so fast. What was it doing here, so far from its home range? Did somebody dump an illegal pet? And why was it following me? Questions with no answers. I got home and told my ex-wife about it. She wasn't happy and forbade me from fishing there. I called my friend in Fish and Game, and he told me that they'd actually taken a gator from that lake 2 summers before. That one was a 6-footer, and they even took a 4-footer from a neighboring lake. It was out of place, but not unheard of. I'm sure some of you in areas where crocodilians are common are laughing at me, and that's fair. But my fear was like experiencing a good 3 inches of snow while you're out on a drive. It can be dangerous and not so out of place. Tree Stalker from Wesley G. One time in Florida, a friend and I decided to go fishing one late evening at a nearby creek. It was in the woods behind our neighborhood. It was about an hour before dark, and these woods had a known history of devil worshipping and murder. But we grew up running around those woods and hunting in them. We knew them like the back of our hand, and the fishing was really good. We ended up out there for about 2 hours before heading back home. We were walking back home. At the time, we were 14, and it was a 30-minute walk. Out of nowhere, we began to hear this crashing sound in the trees. We looked up. There, I swear to you, we saw a black, humanish shape swinging towards us. We freaked out and began to run, armed only with fishing poles and machetes. As we ran, the thing in the trees began to make a roar or scream. It sounded like pigs being slaughtered and women screaming. I'll never forget that bone-chilling sound. We ran for our lives. About 3/4 of the way home, there was a small open field of tall grass, which was waist-high. The thing hit the ground from about 15 feet up and began to chase us on foot. But as it got closer to us in the field, it seemingly disappeared. We could see the tall grass parting as if something was there, but nothing was visible. We kept going and finally reached the hole in a 10-foot tall chain-link fence, which was just big enough for us to fit through if we crawled. Someone before our time must have cut it to gain access to those woods. One at a time we dove through it, then stood to run when that thing hit the fence behind us, bringing that section down. Then the noise and everything stopped. We didn't look back, we just kept running. We made it back to my place. We told my parents about it, but they didn't believe us. The night after, the entire neighborhood was outside at midnight, listening to a bone-chilling roar or screaming, the same kind we'd heard earlier. This lasted for about an hour. Later the next day, we took the adults to where it happened. Unknown to us, on the path to our usual fishing spot, someone had drawn pentagrams on 6 trees, each at a point of a bigger pentagram on the ground, and we had mindlessly walked through it on our way to fish the first time, and we didn't notice. After that, those woods got much worse. Nowadays in that neighborhood, only one place is lived in, a single house, and no one really stays.
Yo, what's up, Scott?
They claim it's haunted.
Sorry, I was muted. I was baking these claws.
Hellhound from Lily Runaway Store. One summer, my family and I decided that going camping would help the family.
How you doing, man?
Since my dad worked alone and couldn't spend a lot of time with me and my siblings. So we went camping in Tennessee. It was a good fall day. We'd rented an old camping site next to a river. They had some pedal boats docked in a small dock by the river. And fishing was my dad's favorite pastime.
Now they just gotta
so
cool
this
it off.
spot was important to him. My siblings, on the other hand, hated the outdoors. They were always on their phones and tablets, but me, I loved going out in the woods. I liked to sketch animals that would be still enough for me to sketch, and I would paint them later when I got back home. So the family settled up in some tents. My youngest sibling was to sleep with my brother, and my mom and dad had their own tent. I also had my own since I was 17. I worked at the time, so I could afford my own. We slept in the tents that night and woke up early in the morning. My dad went fishing while my mom and I went hiking. My siblings also went hiking but chose a different trail to go on. So it was just me and my mom. About a mile or so in, we stopped to eat some lunch. Just 2 sandwiches. We finished around 12 minutes in and started to hike again. Birds were chirping and singing, and we heard various insects. But at a certain point, the forest grew dark.
3 decades of my
Even though it was quite early in the
work
morning.
all around me in 2
My
rooms.
mom even raised an eyebrow and spoke up.
Wow.
That's
And?
it.
Is it a lot?
She went to check her phone, which was now dead. We didn't find it too surprising since my mom always forgot to charge her phone. So I checked my phone, and it was also dead. Okay then, now that's odd, I thought. But we continued on through the trail. As we walked, we felt something strange, like we were being watched or followed. At this time, my mom was pretty spooked out and wanted to go back to camp. I didn't, so I convinced her it was probably just a storm coming in. So we walked for another 2 hours. We soon got to our destination, an old beautiful waterfall. Even with it being as dark as it was at the time, it was still quite the sight. When we arrived, a few deer
2
a
rooms?
small
Damn,
river
brother.
that the waterfall flowed into.
That's awesome.
It brightened our day, just for a little bit, until it began.
So what do you plan on doing?
And we had to leave. We walked the same.
And why'd you bring them all into 1 room? 2
My
rooms.
mom stopped about
3
2
rooms,
hours back
2 rooms.
down the trail. Did you hear that? She said. No. It sounded like a dog. We both got worried. My mom and I were animal lovers and didn't want to leave the dog out there. So we started to call for it. Here, doggy, my mom was yelling, and so was I. We were looking around, but all we found was a collar on the ground. Here, boy, I yelled. Suddenly, a large, massive dog came running out of the bush. I was startled and stumbled backwards, praying that I hadn't scared it, making it want to hurt us. It didn't. Instead, it sat there just looking at us blankly. My mom walked over and gently lowered herself down to me and the dog. It sniffed my mom's hand and began to wag its tail. She looked down at the torn collar. Is that yours, boy? My mom asked. This dog looked sick and skinny.
Poor
So we did
dog.
what any sane person would do. We took it back, and it stayed with us for the remainder of our stay. Dad even let us keep it. We took it to the vet. The vet said it was some sort of Great Dane mixed with a husky, due to its large size. She also said, besides it being really skinny, it was healthy. No parasites at all. That made us happy.
Oh, is it like
We took it home and everything was fine for a few days. But I
Skinwalker?
did notice it was getting way too attached to me. The poor dog would follow me around like a lost puppy. Well, I guess we was. We
Yeah,
did
because
walk
the dog
for all
probably
day.
had terrible
But
humans.
soon the dog began to snap at people, becoming really aggressive and protective over me. It got so bad we had to put him through a training program. But soon he got better. He was still very protective of me. I honestly didn't mind. It made me feel safe. But I hated leaving him for school. My mom said he would get really territorial over my room and would not let anyone inside it. And he wouldn't leave there either. But what I found weird is that he would never leave my side. After 4 months, he still wouldn't. He hardly ate, and he wouldn't even go to the bathroom on his own. He would just stare at me a lot too, like he was trying to communicate with me how much mental stuff he's gone through. It hurt my soul. I love him, yeah, but it is just sad. One night, there was a break-in. I was home alone. My mom and dad were off to do some things at my sibling's school.
Initially, pulled it all out looking for something specific. Now I'm organizing it more. School stuff.
Oh God.
News.
That's the night I figured out what I would call him.
I'm gonna choose some stuff to post on Instagram. I love that.
His eyes had this deep killer look, and he was protecting me, like a German shepherd would its officer.
Feel free to
The
share,
man who
dude.
broke in had to go to the hospital.
Whatever you want.
We found out later the guy was a single father, working 2 different jobs trying to take care of 4 kids alone. That's why we didn't call the cops on the dude. But killer would have killed the man if I didn't tell him to release him.
Good.
But when he did, I swear that dog's eyes looked almost red. I could have sworn if he wasn't my dog, he would be something else entirely. But I know he loves me, even if I think he's a hellhound of some sort. At least he's chosen to protect me.
Sounds like a dog that's been through a lot.
Fire on the Mountain. From Anonymous. I'm an outdoors guy. I can't remember a time when I wasn't out having a fire in the middle of nowhere, or fishing unnamed lakes in the woods. I'm accustomed to hearing wolves and coyotes at night, so wildlife never really bothered me. I was living in Kelowna, British Columbia at the time.
Oh, Kelowna.
It wasn't very far from my house. Maybe 30
Been
minutes at best. There was snow on the ground. Was heading out on another fishing/camping trip. I normally tended to leave my keys in my unlocked truck when I knew no one else would be around. But this time was different. I remember walking from my truck through the trees to a clearing on the mountain with a view of the city. Once I got my fire going, I turned off my bright flashlight. I was having a good time listening to classic country and singing along.
Gross.
But then the hair on my neck stood up, and I knew something was out there. Like I said, I'm accustomed to wildlife.
It's always the hair on my neck
Like
stands
a
up.
bear, not a cougar, a coyote, or a wolf watching me. I turned on my light and put the light directly behind me. There were 2
Somebody's
blood red
watching
eyes
me.
looking in my direction, about 100 yards away. I felt a sinking dread fill my body. I pressed the panic button on my keys so I could find my truck easier and follow the noise. I quickly grabbed my axe and my flashlight, and I ran back to my truck, shining my light in every direction to see if I could see who or whatever it was. Once I got back to my truck, I threw it in drive and sped off the mountain, still feeling that dread.
Fair.
I didn't feel safe until I got back home. The next morning, I went back to where the eyes had been. I knew where they were, as I'd been there before. When I made it there, I quickly checked my surroundings, looking for any sign of life from the previous night. I didn't see anything. No prints, no freshly broken branches. Not sure what it was. Not
Creepy.
sure what kind of animal has red eyes like that.
I wonder how many encounters like this are just like bears, or like
Because I'm afraid whatever that was might be
deers.
closer.
People just tripping out because it's night.
Umbagog occurrence.
How's it
From
Umbagog?
Clarence. I've been an avid fisherman for over 20 years. Fishing everywhere from the piers of Santa Cruz, California.
But hey, I do believe there's stuff out there, man. Don't get me wrong. I've seen my fair share.
But the creepiest thing I've ever experienced happened about 7 years ago, when I was fishing with my buddy Rob at Lake Umbagog on the border of Maine and New Hampshire.
Oh, like Umbagog. I thought Umbagog was like a creature name.
The leaves were just starting to turn.
Like native?
Rob and I had rented a small cabin on the shores of the lake for a long weekend of fishing, hiking, and just getting away from it all. The first day went great. The weather was perfect and the fish were biting. We caught some nice brook trout and sat around the campfire that evening, sipping bourbon and telling tall tales. The next day, we decided to take the canoe out to this spot, about a mile up the lake, which a local had told us was a honey hole for big lake trout. It was a bit of a paddle and took us into the narrow
It's a
feeder
honey
of the
hole.
lake, surrounded by steep, forested hills. The farther we went, the more silent and still everything got. At first it was peaceful, but then it was eerie. We finally reached the spot and started to fish. The action was a little slow, but we each caught a couple respectable 5 to 6 pound Lakers. As evening approached, a dense fog started to roll in off the lake. We knew we should head back, but we were way too determined to land a real monster before calling it a day. Suddenly, I got a huge hit on my line. That fish fought like a demon, nearly pulling me out of my canoe a couple of times. After a 15-minute battle, it felt like, I finally got it up in the boat. It was a lake trout, all right. Easily 15 to 20 pounds.
Damn.
But there was something very strange about it.
I'm not a big fisher. Anyone else
I went
a
to
big fisher?
and I noticed it had some kind of
Or
large
anyone
amulet
enjoy
caught in its
fishing?
mouth, tangled in the lure. The thing looked ancient, like it was made of tarnished silver with strange symbols etched into it. When I tried to grab it, the fish gave a very powerful thrash and snapped my line, disappearing into the depths, taking the amulet with it. Rob and I sat there dumbfounded. We quickly packed up the gear and started to paddle for the cabin in the fading light and thickening fog. We were both kind of spooked. That amulet looked positively occult. About halfway back, we suddenly noticed another canoe, maybe 30 yards off to our left, just sitting there in the fog.
Ooh, a toothbrush. That's a word.
The silhouette of a lone figure sitting in it, facing away from us. Rob called out, "Ahoy there!" But no response.
Ahoy,
We
matey.
paddled a little closer, but the figure never moved or acknowledged us.
Is that a mannequin?
The canoe looked very old-fashioned, almost like a dugout. As we passed within 10 yards of it, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I turned to Rob and saw his face had gone white as a sheet.
Is he dead?
He stammered, "That's not possible." I looked back at the other canoe, and to my utter disbelief, I could see right through the figure.
Oh.
It was translucent,
That's what he was dead.
ghostly, and though it faced away from us, I suddenly felt it was undoubtedly aware of our presence. A deep instinctual terror seized me. I started to paddle like a madman, as did Rob. Neither of us dared to look back until we reached the dock at our cabin. The ghostly figure and canoe were nowhere to be seen, but we didn't talk much that night. After a restless sleep, we packed up at first light and got the heck out of there, not even bothering to fish anymore.
Why is it always like in these stories they run away?
Later, on the history of Lake Umpagog,
You wouldn't want to like.
never did
get
find
closer
anything
and
that
see?
might explain what we'd seen.
That's probably why I died first in a horror
I
movie.
still fish, but I have not gone back to Lake Umpagog. Rob won't even fish from a canoe anymore. I think we'd both rather not know the full truth behind that apparition and the strange amulet we pulled from the depths. A Cajun's Encounter. From Backwoods Fisher. This happened to me and my cousin Jed about 5 years back. I still get goosebumps when I think about it. You see, Jed and I grew up fishing together in the bayous of southern Louisiana. We would spend countless hours in our John boat, exploring every nook and every cranny of the swamps around our hometown of Houma. We thought we'd seen it all. Gators to water moccasins to catfish the size of a grown man's leg. But nothing could have prepared us for what we encountered that muggy July night.
Having a bad night back home and it works, but now I got metal stream and a girl just
We were
sounded
out
me.
looking for frogs.
I don't
something
believe
we'd
you.
done 1,000 times before.
I don't believe you.
The bayou was alive with the sounds of crickets, frogs, and the occasional splash of a gar or catfish.
I guess you'll just
We
have
had our
to
headlamps on.
send
and
me
were
boobs
slowly
too.
cruising the bank,
I'm just joking.
scanning for the telltale glint of frog eyes in the reeds. We'd been at it for
Is
about
this that
5
same girl
minutes
you're
when Jed
seeing?
suddenly grabbed my arm. Luke,
Like, you were
have
seeing somebody,
noticed
weren't you?
that? You see that? He pointed to a dim light about 50 yards ahead, back in a narrow side channel that we'd never explored before. It looked like an old kerosene lantern just floating there in the dark. Now, we knew there were no other people crazy enough to be out in the swamp this late at night
Not seeing anyone?
Sure as heck,
Oh, you're out on a
lanterns
date
don't just
a bit ago.
float in midair by themselves. But Jed, being the
Senor
fearless,
Bachelor.
more foolhardy one, insisted we check it out. Against my better judgment, I agreed. As we slowly approached the light, I noticed the air getting colder, which was darn strange for a July night in Louisiana. The crickets and frogs had gone silent too. It was like the whole swamp was holding its breath. We got within about 20 feet of the lantern, and I could see it was one of those old-timey ones, like something straight out of the 1800s. It was just hanging there, defying gravity, its flame casting eerie shadows on the cypress trees. Jed reached out to grab it, and I swear to God, that
I've sent you many boob pics. What are you
drifted
talking about?
just out of his reach and began to bob slowly down the channel, like it was trying to lead us somewhere. Jed, of course, started to follow it. I hissed at him to come back, but he was transfixed. I had no choice but to trail after him. My heart was pounding by then. The lantern led us deeper and deeper into the swamp, into
I want this to be
areas I'd never
smooth.
seen
I don't
before,
need it to be crazy.
where the trees grew so thick overhead you could hardly see the sky. After what felt like an eternity, the lantern came to a stop in a small circular clearing. In the center of the clearing was an old, decrepit shack, the kind you might see in some voodoo film. The lantern floated right up to the door and just sort of winked out, like someone had blown out the flame.
They said winked.
Jed, in a trance-like state, started to walk towards the shack. I grabbed his arm, trying to snap him out.
I knew it, Jed,
He
once.
shook me off.
He was an asshole.
He walked right up to that door and opened it. I was a few steps behind him. My blood turned to ice water in my veins.
I don't trust anyone named Jed.
Inside the shack, it was pitch
No
black,
offense to anyone named Jed.
except for a single candle flickering on a table in the
Unless
center.
you're the Jed I know, then I don't.
And hunched over that
depends.
table was a figure, dressed in all black with a wide-brimmed hat. The figure slowly lifted its head, and I swear to all that is holy, that thing had no face. Just a blank expanse of
Oh, we watched that new Omen movie.
should have been.
It was pretty good, man.
Jed finally snapped out of it.
A little bit of demon
He let
fucking.
out a scream that didn't sound human and bolted right out of the shack. Nearly
Leads
knocking
right
me
into
into
the-
process.
The Omen.
The two of us ran like the devil himself was chasing us.
Then I watched the original Omen, which I've never seen before.
Tripping over roots.
That was really good, actually.
We didn't stop until we reached our John boat. We tore out of that bayou like a bat out of heck, and didn't speak a word to
You used
me
to
until
have
the
boss
whole
named
way
Jed?
back to the
He was
land.
always tweaked on drugs? Like,
It was only when we
Sounds
were
like
loading the
Jed.
boat onto the trailer that Jed
demon
finally
fucking,
spoke.
yeah.
Luke, what the heck
Impregnating?
was that? His voice was a bit shaky.
It's basically the story of,
I had
like,
an answer for him then.
how Damien was conceived.
We've never gone back to Bayou Marmot,
Like, why he's the Antichrist and how he got there.
but sometimes in the dark of night I still see that
Or how he was made,
figure
pretty
in my
much.
dreams, and I wonder
Who was
what
behind
would
it.
happen if Jed had taken one step further into that shack, or if I'd never decided to trail him. That's my story, and before you ask, no, we weren't drunk or high or nothing like that.
Like a jackal.
What we saw was real, even if it shouldn't have been. Those swamps have secrets, old and dark ones, and sometimes when you go poking around where you shouldn't, those secrets tend to poke back. There's a reason I stick to fishing in the day now.
Oh, my thumb.
The Umpqua Thing, from 3 Gar 3. It was about a decade ago, back when I was living in Oregon. I had a little cabin out in the Umpqua National Forest, near a spot called Toketee Falls. It was my slice of paradise. Just me, my dog Buck, and the
There's
great
not much, like, boobs or sex anymore in horror movies, eh?
Hunting and fishing in the North Umpqua River, just soaking in the peace and quiet.
It's like dropped down a lot.
Now, I've honestly been a fisherman my whole life. I grew up with a rod in my hand, thanks to my old man.
That's the good old 80s,
In all
man.
my years of fishing, I've seen some strange things.
Oh, should we be doing this,
that I couldn't
Chuck?
quite identify.
Oh, babe, yeah, it's
Weird
fine.
signs
We're
and
alone out
things.
here. Okay.
Those sorts of things.
Jason
But
comes
nothing,
up. "Rah!"
I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what I encountered that autumn at Toketee Falls. It was late September, and the fall run of Chinook salmon was in full swing. These fish, let me tell ya, they're monsters. Some of them push 50 or even 60 pounds, and they put up a heck of a fight. It's the kind of fishing that gets your blood pumping.
Not much
I'd
of a
been out
fish.
in the river since before dawn that day, hip deep in the icy water, casting my line into the churning pool at the base of the falls. I'd hooked a couple of beauties, but the big one, the king of the run, had eluded me so far. As the sun started to dip behind the trees, I decided to make a few more casts before finally calling it a day. That's when I felt it. A tug on my line.
Penis? Oh.
A tug so strong it nearly pulled me off my feet. I've hooked into some big fish in my day, but this was something else. It felt like I'd snagged onto a submarine. My reel screamed as the line peeled off of it. The rod bent nearly in half. I was sure it was going to snap at any second. But I've never been one to back down from a fight. So I set my heels in and started to battle whatever Leviathan I'd hooked onto. We went back and forth for some time.
Great movie.
It would take off on blistering runs, and I'd crank the reel to gain back line. Soon my arms were burning, and my back ached. But slowly, inch by inch, I started to win. Finally, I caught a glimpse of it in the frothing water. At first, I thought it was a log.
That water's
Then I
frothing.
saw the tail fin, thrashing back and forth. This thing, whatever it was massive. Bigger than any salmon I'd ever seen. Bigger, in fact, than any fish I thought could exist in that river. I fought it a while longer, before I managed to bring it into the shallows. That's when I got a real good look at it. Folks, I've been fishing for more than half a century, and I've never seen anything like what I saw that day. It was shaped like a salmon, but that's where these similarities end. Its scales weren't silver, but rather a mottled gray-green, like the color of the river rocks. And its size, this thing was easily 8 feet long, and as thick around as a man's waist. But the most unsettling part was its eyes.
So
They
is
were
I.
too big for its head, and jet black, like 2 pieces of obsidian. And they had an intelligence in them that sent a shiver down my spine. That wasn't just some dumb animal. There was something ancient and knowing in those eyes, something that seemed to stare right into my soul. As I stood there, chest heaving, staring at this creature, it gave a sudden thrash. The line snapped like it was sewing thread, and the fish, if you can call it that, disappeared back into the depths of the pool. I stood there for a long time, just trying to process what I'd seen. I've never been a superstitious man, but there was something about that encounter that shook me to my core. There was a wrongness to that creature, a sense that it didn't belong in this world. In the years since, I've tried to find out if anyone else has ever seen anything like it, but I've come up empty. I don't fish at Toketee Falls anymore. In fact, I've never gone back to that part of the Umpqua River. I don't know what I saw that day. Maybe I don't want to know. The Man by the River. From Jane J89. I'd like to preface this by saying that, at the time, I didn't find this story spooky at all. My dad, on the other hand, certainly did. When I was 9 or so, my dad used to take me fishing quite a bit in the good weather. I'll admit I was never that much interested in fishing, but I did like being outdoors and hanging out with my dad. So, I was happy to go with him. Tired of our usual catch of teeny-tiny sunfish and the occasional equally teeny-tiny perch, my dad picked a different fishing spot that day. Unlike the ponds I was used to, this was a river, and the fast-moving current splashed us both as my dad cast his line. We hadn't even been there an hour when I got bored with the fishing. Setting down my fishing rod, I began to climb around on the rocks in the riverbank, pretending to be a superhero of some sort, or maybe a marine biologist. I was an odd little kid, so it could have gone either way. I was checking to see if there was anything alive hiding underneath the rocks at the water's edge when I first saw the man. He seemed ordinary enough to me. Just a short, dark-haired man in what looked to me like normal fishing gear. It would be years later before it occurred to me that I'd only ever seen fishermen on television and movies dressed like that, and the clothes he wore were actually decades out of style. As a kid, it made perfect sense to me.
This actually
He was a fisherman. He was wearing what fishermen wore. The only thing that seemed off to me at the time was that he was standing a few feet behind my dad, but they weren't talking to each other. My dad hadn't even turned around. He'd always been pretty friendly and loved to talk, so it was strange to me that he hadn't at least said hello to this newcomer. I was wondering why he was being so rude suddenly, when the man noticed me. Without so much as a word to my father, he quickly walked to the riverbank and waved me over. We were still only a few feet away from my dad then,
swim,
so I figured I was safe to go see what he wanted.
Come swim.
When I reached him, he crouched down to my level, and I found myself looking into the saddest pair of eyes I'd ever seen. This man looked like he was having the absolute worst day of his life. He didn't sound any happier than he looked. "You really shouldn't be playing so close to the edge, honey," he said somberly. "Those rocks are slippery. You could fall in, and it's awfully hard to swim in a current that strong."
Oh, I was trying to save her.
Drown.
Whatever.
I remember being a bit put out that a random stranger was telling me what to do, and that he had implied that my doggy paddle wouldn't be enough in the event that I fell into the river. Nevertheless, he was staring at me so intensely that I assured him I would stay away from the rocks, and I went to pick flowers instead. My dad came to find me a little while later, confused as to why I'd given up jumping around on the rocks. When I explained that the man had told me not to play there, he frowned. "What man are you talking about?" he asked. "The man who was standing behind you," I answered, obviously.
So my kids are creepy.
Suddenly, Dad didn't feel like fishing anymore. He abruptly picked up all of our gear and led me back to the car. As he was loading everything into the trunk, he told me we had been the only two people by the river all morning. I tried to argue that there had been another man there, that I'd even spoken to him, but he shook his head. "It's just been me and you, kiddo. Look, ours is the only car in the parking lot." He was right, of course, and whether he believed what I said or not, he quickly decided we could spend the rest of our morning together at the closest Tim Hortons instead. We never went back to that river. I don't know whether it was because my dad was spooked, or because he just didn't catch anything there. But all of our subsequent fishing trips involved familiar ponds and little fish. I do know, however, that I never forgot the man by the river. Knowing now that children are more likely to experience the supernatural, I wonder if he had drowned in that river, or maybe he lost a loved one to the current, and he was spending his afterlife preventing others from making the same mistake. Regardless,
Kinda nice.
I hope he has moved on by now, or at least found some peace. No one ought to be that sad for eternity.
True. That's pretty sad.
Attacked at Quetico Provincial Park. From Rapscunyon. About 15 years ago, my brother, we'll just call him Steve, and I decided to take a trip up to Quetico Provincial Park in Ontario, Canada. We'd heard the fishing up there was incredible. Pristine lakes filled with monster northern pike, walleye, and lake trout.
Sounds sick.
It was the kind of wilderness fishing we'd always dreamed of. We packed up our gear, rented a canoe, and set off into the park. The plan was to spend a week fishing and camping, really getting away from it all. For the first few days, that's exactly what we did. We paddled from lake to lake, setting up camp on the shore each night, cooking the fish we caught over the campfire. It was perfect. But on the fourth night, things took a turn. We had set up camp on the shore of a particularly remote lake, one that the park ranger had told us didn't get many visitors. It was a beautiful spot with crystal clear water and towering pines all around. We'd had a great day of fishing and were settling in for the night when we heard it. It was a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard before. It started low, like a rumble, but it quickly rose into a high-pitched, almost metallic screech. It echoed across the lake, bouncing off the trees. Steve and I just sat there by the fire, staring at each other with wide eyes. What the heck was that?
Those damn kids again.
I shook my head. We waited, hardly breathing. But for the time, the sound did not come again. After a while, we chalked it up to some weird acoustics, maybe a distant plane or something. We went to bed uneasy, still telling ourselves it was nothing. The next day, we decided to fish the far end of the lake, where a small river flowed in. We were hoping the change in terrain might mean even better fishing. We set out early, the morning mist still clinging to the water. As we neared the mouth of the river, I noticed something strange in the water ahead of us. It looked like a log floating on the surface, but as we got closer, I realized it was moving, and it was big, at least as long as our 17-foot canoe.
Damn.
Steve saw it too. "What is that?" he asked, his voice tight. Before I could answer, the thing disappeared beneath the surface, leaving a trail of bubbles. Steve and I exchanged a glance, unsure if we should continue. But the lure of big fish was too strong for us.
Need the Vaseline out, man.
A bit more cautiously.
Need the Vaseline out.
We fished the river mouth for a while with no luck. The odd thing was, we didn't see any signs of fish at all. No rises, no swirls, nothing. It was like that river was dead. We were just about to give up and head back when I felt a tug on my line. I gave a yell of excitement and started to reel it in, but immediately I could tell something was wrong. Whatever I'd hooked into was too heavy, way too heavy, and it wasn't fighting like a fish. It was more like I'd snagged a submerged log. But then the line started to move, cutting through the water in a straight line, right towards the middle of the river. "Cut the line!" Steve shouted.
Come on, do
But
it
was too
now.
late. In an instant, the thing changed direction and started coming right at us. The line spinning
What?
off my reel so fast, it was smoking. Steve
Cool.
grabbed a paddle and started back-paddling furiously, trying to get us away. But it was no use. That thing burst from the water right next to the canoe, and I swear to God, I have no idea how to describe what I saw. But I'll try. It was like a giant eel, but with a head more like a crocodile. Its body was dark green,
Sick.
almost black, and it had to be at least 20 feet long. But the worst part was its eyes. They were yellow, with slit pupils like a snake, and they seemed to glow in an evil way. The creature lunged at the canoe, jaws snapping shut, inches from Steve's arm. He yelped and swung the paddle at it, but it was like hitting a concrete wall. That thing didn't even seem to notice. I was still attached to the creature by my line, and it began to drag the canoe towards the center of the river.
Cool.
The boat was tilting dangerously, water slopping over the sides. I knew if we capsized, we were dead. This thing would tear us apart in seconds. In a moment of desperate clarity, I grabbed my knife and slashed at the line. It parted with a snap, and the creature disappeared back into the water, taking my rod and reel with it.
I just
Steve
want to
and
be
I
left
sat
alone.
there in the
Yeah,
rocking
yeah.
canoe, panting and shaking. We didn't speak a word as we paddled back to camp as fast as we could. We packed up our things with trembling hands and hiked away, not stopping until we reached the ranger station. We told the ranger we'd had an accident, lost some gear, but in the end, we didn't mention the creature.
I always want to say to these narrators, pics are right? Pics didn't have 'em, brother.
Thank you for tuning in to Unexplained Encounters. If you're not already, follow and listen to Unexplained Encounters on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Leave us a rating while you're at it. Get some cool creepy merch at eeriecast.store.
I do like them,
Download
though.
our show where I narrate scary work stories. It's called Tales from the Break Room. For more terrifyingly entertaining shows from EerieCast, go to eeriecast.com. And if you want to listen to Unexplained Encounters and all the other EerieCast shows without pesky ads, sign up for EerieCast Plus at eeriecast.com/plus.
Don't tell me
You'll
what to
also
do,
get
man.
exclusive access to horror audiobooks only available to EerieCast Plus members. And you'll get 20% off our EerieCast.store merch through our members-only monthly discount code.
Pretty good, actually.
Finally, if you have a scary story of the unexplained, send it to me at darkstories.org. I think that's about it. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.
So strange.
Send your scariest workplace stories to us at eeriecast.com/submit and rate and review Tales from the Break Room on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks.
But I don't want to.
Hi, welcome to Dead and Roasted. What can I get you?
I was reviewing my stories today when I mistakenly began reading a story that just kept going and going and going. So you'll be delighted to hear that today's set of stories is extra long, featuring disturbing hauntings and an epic tale of a particular painting featuring a wolfhound.
I love it.
Grab your friends and gather your coffee, if you've got any of either, that is. It's time for some allegedly...
How did he know I have no friends? What the
Tales
fuck?
from the Break Room. Dollar General's Poltergeist. From Needle. I work at Dollar General as a key holder. I just do a little more than a cashier, like opening and closing the store. When I first started at the job, my boss, Amy, and a few coworkers just joked around about a ghost that supposedly haunted the store. Personally, I believed in ghosts and demons, so this was naturally a bit eerie to me. But I pushed it aside and put on a smile. A few weeks went by. I mostly had day shifts from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. But one Friday in December, I had my first night shift. I was a little nervous because around 7 p.m., the sun began to set, and I was up at the register alone. The person I was working with was Amy, so she could show me how closing worked. As I checked out the last customer after a long line, I noticed how quiet it was. I sat up there picking up trash and receipts that people threw on the ground instead of putting it in a trash can. Just then, the automatic doors that slid open and closed when they sensed movement started to open and close on their own very quickly. I stared for a few moments. Then, once I came back to my senses, an old woman said hello to me. I turned and saw her, then looked back at the doors, which had now stopped moving on their own.
She's the ghost.
Apparently, no one else had seen it happen, so I went on like normal until we closed and locked up the doors.
Oh.
Now, before we're allowed to leave, we have to count down the money and lock up. So, since I was the cashier that night, I wasn't allowed to handle the money in the safe. But I was allowed to sit in the break room while Amy counted the money. While I sat back there, I felt cold. But that didn't bother me. Not until I felt like something was watching. I looked around, and I swear I saw someone run by the
Somebody's
door.
watching me.
I got up and poked my head out, but there was no one in the hall. About 30 minutes after that, we were able to go home. Nothing else happened to me until I got a raise and became a key holder.
Ooh.
One Sunday night, I was in the back room, picking up trash and sorting through products. It was quiet, until I heard the back door slide open. I stopped, and I just stood there. Eventually, I willed myself to turn, and as I turned, a stack of boxes filled with DVDs fell on me. Thankfully, I wasn't really harmed. Got a bruise or two, a couple of scrapes, but I swear the stack was neatly stacked up before.
Remember
It wasn't even
DVDs?
leaning. When I shared this story with others, no one seemed to believe me. Small things like things falling over and doors slamming happen every once in a while now. But I've learned to just ignore it and try to go about my day. Warning. The following story contains depictions of harm against pets.
No.
Something followed me home from the pet crematorium. From Casket.
There's a ghost.
Let me start this story by saying I'm not the most interesting person out there, but I do have an interesting job. I work nights at a pet crematorium, which is probably the worst time to be around so many dead things.
That'd be the worst
I
fucking
work
job.
alone most of the time, because, the job really isn't for everyone.
Yeah.
When some poor soul decides they want to give it a try, they usually don't last more than one shift. Let's just say, I can't be around ground beef when it's cooking anymore because of this job. I've always been into the paranormal and all things creepy, so a job like this isn't that bad for me. Now, my mom took her own life from schizophrenia when I was growing up, so I kind of always knew what signs to look for and have always been worried it might be passed on to me. I will mention here one thing that makes the job worth it is that this is the last place people's pets go before they never see them again. So I always make sure I do everything right and make their paw prints and everything perfect. Some weird things started to happen within the first few weeks of me working here, though. Like thinking I saw one of the dog's paws move, or hearing a small meow coming from one of the cats.
Yo, you ever seen that movie
I only started to
Afterlife?
get worried when the sounds began
With,
to get worse.
Christina
September
Ricci?
day, an older woman came in to drop off one of her cats that had passed away.
You see
At first, she was
all
acting
of
kind
that
strange,
woman in that
not
movie.
making eye contact, making a conscious effort to avoid looking at my face. She just kept looking behind me or around me, like she was looking for something or looking at someone. Getting creeped out, I told her to go wait in the seating area while I got her paperwork ready. I walked into the office to grab her papers, and when I turned around to leave, she was standing right behind me, not even 2 feet away. Now she was crying, and that wasn't it. I looked at her face and it began to distort, becoming almost inhuman. She reached out for me and put her hands on my shoulders.
So the movie's like she
Looked me right in the
dies,
eyes, and in a low, raspy voice,
and
she
this
said, "Bad things are following me."
Morticia can talk to the dead.
Startled and creeped out, I told
So
her
through like the
that
whole movie, she's like naked. It's your boobs, you see
she
your
then
butt,
turned and walked away.
vagina, everything.
She hadn't taken her papers. So I followed and went into the seating area.
It's a good movie.
She was sitting there, how I'd left her before. I gave her the papers and she smiled. She signed them.
I think it's called
Her attitude
Afterlife.
had completely changed since she first came into the shop. She left
Has
me
Liam
wondering
Neeson in
about
it
what
as
just
the
happened. I didn't know what she meant at the time,
mortician.
but
Justin
little
Long.
did I know what was coming for me. A few weeks went by, and I was working by myself again. I was about to load a pet into the machine when I began to get into a daze. My head was spinning, and my eyes were getting all fuzzy. It felt like I was about to pass out. It does get very hot in there next to the oven, so I grabbed a drink, and I took a minute to regain my composure. Once my head began to feel better, I went back to putting the pet into the machine, closing the door and starting it up. After a few seconds, I thought I heard a whimpering noise coming from inside. That should be impossible, I quickly opened the door a little bit to look in, and that's when I saw the pet I just put in flailing and rolling around inside, its fur and flesh sticking to the bottom, peeling off every time it rolled around.
That's fucked up. I don't like it.
I turned off the machine, and I tried to get the pet out, but it was simply too hot. I had to wait for it to cool down. Once it was cool enough, I crawled inside to try and get the dog out. Once I was in enough to reach the dog, the door closed on top of me.
Good.
I could hear someone laughing from outside, and I could hear the machine turning on,
Good.
beginning to heat up. It was getting hot, fast. I saw flames beginning to build up higher and higher on the side of the machine
Good.
as it got hotter. I couldn't move with the heavy oven door pushing down on my back, making it even harder to breathe with the smoke.
You deserve it.
I tried to scream for help, but it was no use, as I was the only one there that night. And every time I opened my mouth, I could feel my throat burning. I tried to wiggle my way backwards to get out, but the door weighed close to 100 pounds, and I was not in the position to lift it properly. I started to feel my skin burning, and as I tried to move around to hit the emergency stop next to the door, I suddenly felt something starting to pick up my feet, pushing me further into the oven. I screamed as loud as I could. The skin on my back and stomach, feeling as if it was peeling off. Whatever it was pushed me all the way up to where the dog was.
It's a dream.
And when I really got a good look at it, I could tell it was very much dead. So what had I seen and heard? Why was it flailing around and making all that noise? Why was I in here? The heat at that point was overbearing. I could feel myself starting to black out. It was only a matter of time before it was all over. Eventually, I do black out. When I came to, I was lying on the floor in front of the machine. Everything was back to normal. But how? What happened? It all had felt so real. Was it a dream or a heat-induced hallucination? I've never experienced something like this before. I looked around at my arms and legs, but there was nothing. No scars, no burns, where there would have been. I tried to compose myself. I walked into the staff lounge area to take a little rest, when suddenly the lights began to flicker before shutting off. And when that happened, instead of sheer darkness, the room was engulfed in flames like a giant oven, and I could feel the heat from them.
Go on.
I started to scream again, praying there was someone nearby, someone else in the building, even though I knew better. And all at once, the flames stopped, and I was back in an empty, dark room. I was done after that. I was ready to go home. I went to the staff locker room, grabbed my things, and left for the night. On the drive home, all I could think about was what just happened in there. I began to wonder if I was losing my mind. But then I glanced into the rearview mirror. I caught a glimpse of someone familiar sitting in my back seat. The old lady. I was so terrified. And
Told you it was the old lady all along. Nailed
I
it.
came to a complete
Fucking knew it.
stop and looked back.
And
The
what'd you
back
find?
seat was empty. I pulled back onto the road and made my way home. I have no idea what happened to me that night, but thankfully, it only ever happened once. I just want to know if I was cursed, or if it was a one-time warning. A warning of what, though? Wolfhound, from Robert S.
Pretty good, wasn't it?
I made my way through art school working as a caregiver. Being that the job had irregular hours, and a preference for those that would work live-in and nocturnal shifts, it let me focus on schoolwork at night and attend my classes.
What's up,
during the
Max?
day.
How's it going? Ah, my
It
Vaseline.
was often grueling staying up late nights, studying while listening to a
Just
baby
doing some
watcher
sculpting.
for any sounds of movement through a half days of sleeplessness. I'm not sure how I passed any of my classes trying to study under those conditions. To make matters even more trying, I was mostly employed by the state, which meant dismal pay. And we had clients
Making
often
some
that had been on
claws
boards of the state
for my
who should have
creature.
been sent to more advanced care facilities long ago. But prohibitive
Well, listen to
costs
scary
and
stories, of
low-income
course.
housing with a regular and largely underqualified staff to be their guardians, health advocates,
I'll show you the
and
full
even
thing.
amateur
Yeah,
social
let's do it.
workers at times. So when a longtime friend, Sophia, offered me twice my
Rawr.
usual pay
There he is.
to work overnight for her grandfather, I was more than happy to accept the offer, because she had even told me the nature of his situation. Now, however, I wish I never took the offer. It
Thank
brought
you,
me
thank
to
you.
an experience that still brings me nightmares to this day. Sophia asked me to meet her at his home with a few family members to discuss the details and meet her grandfather.
Yeah, thank you.
This was odd because we'd grown up together. I had met her grandfather on several occasions, and even had
You just
sleepovers
gotta finish the
at his
claws
house
and
when
then
we were kids.
on to the paint job.
I pulled up in front of his house to find my friend standing outside by the street. I immediately took in her expression. It was obvious that she wanted me to know a few things before I went inside with the rest of the family. I got out of my car, and before I could close the distance for a hug, I saw the dark circles and lines of worry painted across her face. They stood out
In clay,
so bright and
almost a year and a half. I've done some
we
digital
embraced
stuff.
The same forceful hug she had always given me throughout our friendship. But even during it, I could feel a deep wariness mixed with gratitude. "Thanks for coming," she said, making a feeble, unconvincing attempt to
Yeah,
mask her
digital
exhaustion.
for a while.
This whole situation has
Wanted to
just
get more
been
into
a
clay,
complete
and
nightmare.
I think I prefer it.
My family
Yeah.
has been fighting each other over who's getting what, what's in the will, how to even afford keeping him in his own home with all the care he needs. God, Bobby, he's changed so much since the strokes. He might remember you, but he may not, and it all depends on the day he's having. I don't even know how to... Her voice trailed off as she went in for another embrace and began to softly cry on my shoulder. It's okay, I began.
Let's smooth
I'm
this
here
out
to
a
help,
bit.
no matter what. I tried to hold back some amount of my own tears after seeing my friend so distressed. Having been a part of these situations enough times myself, I came
You
prepared.
do any art?
I removed the small packet of tissues from my pocket and handed them to Sophia without a word. I took a step back and gave her a moment to gather herself. I waited until she could look up at my face before going on. "Come on, let's go in. Try to make some sense of all of this." She led me up the porch and into the living room of the modest home. I wasn't so much greeted as acknowledged by a small gathering of faces wearing expressions ranging from sad, exasperated, to angry, but mostly a mix of all three in varying degrees. I put on my professional face and decided to just let them tell me what they needed. Oftentimes, the family just needs to feel like they're being heard in these kinds of situations, not really listening to anything you have to say about care or medical needs, only acting as a sounding board for wrapped-up emotions and all too often old feuds between individuals who are now forced by circumstance to interact with each other again. The emotion flowed, and as is usually the case, the dialogue began to break down. Voices raised, tempers flared, tears began to well up in eyes before the matriarch of the family, Sophia's mother Mary, took control of the group. Mary composed
Earlier I
herself
tried getting
so
into clay
well,
work,
practicing to
but I
do
could
so.
never really get into it. I
I'd
don't
not
have
done
the
too much in the past few
fine
days.
motor skills. Oh, okay.
After ushering the rest of the family into other rooms,
It takes a bit of
out
time.
the house altogether, she wordlessly
Trying to get into
beckoned
Blender work.
Sophia
Oh yeah,
and I
that's the
into
first
an
program I
adjacent
used.
room out of earshot
Wasn't
of
for
their
me.
grandfather.
So I've resorted to 3D printing because
Our
most
seats
of the
around
work
a
is already
full
done.
print kitchen
Hey,
table,
3D printing's fun.
Sophia began a perfunctory introduction. Bobby has been caregiving for quite some time. He's more than able to help.
Hey, at least I tried out all that stuff,
Her mother
right?
cut
You
her
figured
off
out what
with
you
a
like.
sharp glare and a dismissive wave of her hand. I know who he is. Question is, will he protect my father and his assets from the rest of my family? If I give you specific instructions on what needs to be done, who can be here and who can't, can I trust you to follow those instructions? Until that point, I'd been expecting Sophia to do a predominant part of the talking for me. But when her mother fixed me with her piercing blue eyes, backed by the presence of a woman who would not tolerate half-truths, lies, or bravado, I simply answered, "Yes, ma'am, I will." I felt at that moment there was no need for a long-winded explanation of my skills or abilities. It just didn't seem like that would be a satisfactory answer. I sat there in silence waiting for her to break eye contact. Honestly, I don't like eye contact. It makes me terribly uncomfortable. But I held my ground for just long enough for the matriarch to turn that intense gaze to Sophia. Mary explained they didn't have...
It's fine, I'm currently working on my second... Ooh, what's your project?
In the home. The family had scraped enough together to pay me for a little while, helped out by his insurance provider. Once again addressing me with that gaze, Mary asked an unexpected question. "You're making your way through art school, correct?" "Yes," I answered, more than a little curious about where this could be headed. "He has a collection of paintings and antiques. It's been the source of many of our, conflicts when it comes to how to help pay for all this. Do you think you could identify if any of them are valuable? And if so, maybe you know a way to get them sold?" "Of course," I said, masking the excitement in my voice. This was exactly what I was going to school for in the first place. I really wish I'd feigned ignorance now, but at the time, I wanted to do whatever I could to help my friend's family. Now, the grandfather's name was Alfred. I remember him being a kind man, but mainly the strong, silent type. He came from Greece in the 50s and worked for a grocery store for most of his life. I only tell you this because he never struck me as a man of wealth. I don't say this to sound mean.
Welcome to my
Oh.
world, bitch.
Hey, thank you for that follow. Welcome to the whorehouse.
Family.
Appreciate
and a few
that.
antique stores where
Taking
I'd worked in
parts
the past.
to cosplay. It's not really
People
from
think
anything,
that
just
what they
random
have
things
is
I've
worth
thrown
more
together
than
into.
it actually is.
Oh. Kind of like kit
It's
bashing.
not a fun part of
but
my job
your
when you have to
costume.
tell someone their priceless family heirloom is worth about as much as an average week of groceries.
It's pretty cool.
Television shows where people get hundreds
Feel
of
free
thousands
to,
of
if
views
you want to
download
share it
their
in
parents' attic
the
have
chat,
made
feel
far
free.
Too many people believe anything that looks old could be their ticket out of the rat race. The reactions from people range from disbelief to real outrage. I can't count the number of people who have stormed out of the shops I worked in, claiming that I am trying to rip them off, even though they came to me for a free appraisal, and I don't make anything off the sale unless authorized by the client after finding a buyer.
I like that.
Caring for Alfred, or Al, as he had always insisted I call him, was actually fairly easy most of the time. Despite a series of strokes that robbed him of some of his mobility,
Gonna mute
more than
the
his conscience,
mic for a sec. I gotta bake this with my heat gun.
and genial.
For that, I made 2 Tuscan Raider
Making
cosplays.
things even better is the bulk of my
Too much work into
responsibilities,
them for it to be
revolved
worn
around
once,
making
but it
him
was
dinner,
fun.
getting him
We
ready
can
for
display it,
bed,
right?
and making sure he stayed there through the
Tuscan
night.
Raiders.
This left me ample time and freedom to sort through the collection. As collections went, I found myself surprised at the variety. The home he lived in was a small, modest house and not the greatest of neighborhoods. Nothing about the decorum of the home would have made anyone believe that he had quite a few items of real value hidden away in the basement. His collection was quite eclectic. He had old firearms, paintings, some fine silver, and some novelty stuff, like a cigarette vending machine from what looked like maybe the 50s, and a few small mechanical slot machines. Far from the norm, this was actually a collection from which a real profit could be made. So for the next few weeks, that was how I spent my evenings. Caring for Al until he went to bed, then spending my evenings in the solitude of the basement doing research on the items, finding the best buyers, reporting my findings to Mary for approval.
I could, but I don't have the space to
Over
display it
time,
anywhere.
Mary's
Helmet
demeanor
maybe, but the
toward me
full
grew less
costume would be...
cold. She could see I was genuinely...
You probably have to buy a
getting close
mannequin,
to
eh?
help her father in his home and pay for his care. I honestly loved this kind of work. It was a little bit like being a detective. You have to figure out everything you can about an item with very little to go on. Oftentimes, you would look through pages and pages of articles just to find the meaning of a particular trademark or symbol on the item. Whole books have been written about the marks on silver goods alone, including where they came from, when they were made, and who made them. I was doing such a good job selling that Mary even offered me a small commission on some of the items when I was able to get a really good price for them.
I usually do like
Wasn't
creatures and
but it was
monsters.
more the gesture that meant something to me.
That's what I really like
Unfortunately,
horror
all the
stuff.
extra money in the world did nothing to change the fact that Al's condition was getting worse.
Yeah, I did a Fallout-inspired character. I did
He would lose his balance easily.
did a monster mask
requiring someone to stay
right
within
there.
easy grabbing distance.
A little bit of a Wendigo.
His memory got worse. He would forget where he was and what he had just been doing.
But mainly like scary.
This often
Creepy
manifested
things.
itself in the most peculiar ways, at times forgetting English altogether. English wasn't his first language, and when this occurred, he would fall back on Greek when he could not remember the English word he was seeking. I do admit that, at first, it was almost endearing. Sophia would often help with some words so that I could better understand what he was asking or trying to tell me. Other
Well,
times,
thanks.
the English language left him altogether.
It's my first mask I
Just
made.
him and I alone.
We're gonna be doing another one
I have plenty of experience
sometime
with
this
dementia
year.
and Alzheimer's
Maybe
patients.
after I finish this
However,
dude.
no amount of experience can prepare you for the challenges a new patient can throw at you. It affects everyone differently. Mary came to me one day with a new look of desperation on her face, an expression that said there was some bad news. She explained that the infighting of the family had reached a point where it was all too likely Al's will was going to be disputed. Some of the family had hired a lawyer when they found out that I was selling his collection. I again was...
Yeah, I got Instagram. This should be my
It always
information.
sounded kind of disgusting. Greed is an ugly thing.
Metal's
People
Horror House.
caring more about inheritance than the care of a
Should
family.
be my about section, I think.
Mary went on to say that she was doing her best to fend them off, but time was running out, especially with Al's mental health in decline. It would only be a matter of time before he was deemed unable to make decisions for himself. The family was pushing to put him in a care home. In short, my time was running out. Mary asked me to sell whatever I could within the time I had left, pointing me in the direction of a locked cabinet built into the wall of the basement. She opened the cabinet, revealing a small collection of paintings. "These will probably be the highest value items, and what the family will be fighting over," she said, with a heavy sadness in her voice. "I was hoping to keep these in my family for as long as I could, but..." She trailed off, choking up a bit. "I understand. I'll do what I can," I replied. After Al had gone to bed that night, I began the process of sorting and researching the paintings. As was the case with the rest of the collection, these paintings were varied in content and value. But I found a few pieces that held some promise. A few of them had come from correctional facilities' art programs, making them unique in content and possibly valuable to the right buyer, if I had the time to find said buyer.
Oh, thank
There was
you.
one piece, however, which
This is not too
stood
bad,
out
eh?
above the rest. It was easily the largest of the paintings, and the one that had been
Some is
finished
3D,
with a hand-carved
using
figure,
ZBrush,
making it appear that
clay,
this piece was in some way
like a mix of stuff.
It was further enhanced.
I
by a
appreciate the
small
compliment,
brass
thank you.
plate embedded in the frame, which read Wolfhound.
Actually, I
The
think
piece
that's
depicted
fake.
an enormous
I can't
Irish
tell.
wolfhound standing guard over a flock of sheep in a peaceful meadow. It was certainly made by a professional painter, given the brushstrokes and technique.
No, it's not
And yet
fake
even
yet.
more promising was that this
You have a
painting
favorite?
was signed by the artist, giving me a good lead off the bat to begin my search. After a few false starts, I began to make some headway with the artist, if not the painting itself. Results bolstered my confidence that I could get a really good price for this piece. The artist was apparently a well-known portrait artist. having been commissioned to do several paintings of prominent local figures, including governors and affluent members of society. Their works are still on display in several of the more prosperous estates around my home state. Once again, I was given hope. This would be a sale that could be very advantageous to the family. However, I could not
Well, the
find
Black
any
Lagoon
information on this
creature.
particular piece.
Yeah, I did that
In
in
order to get a
one
really good
night.
look at the painting,
I bought like some
I
dollar
decided
store
to hang
clay
it
and
on the
just kind of
basement
fiddled
wall,
with it.
just so I could look at it in
I
its
got it
entirety.
somewhere over there. So, yeah.
Information on the artist
Somewhere
was
back
easy
there.
enough to find, but
Oh, the brain
the
worm.
works seemed to be
Yeah, I like that. That's one of my
finished.
faves I've done too.
Then I had a breakthrough. The artist was living in Poland in the late 1930s, and when the Second World War began, they'd fled Poland, leaving behind several of their works which had been lost to history,
Oh,
or
that's
so the article put it. I won't lie, my excitement began to rise, thinking I
Right.
may have stumbled across a lost painting of a famed artist. I was lost in my research and
That's
reading
big.
when a voice shattered my concentration, throwing me out of my
The
trance.
favorite that I've done?
I cannot say
Um,
for certain what was said, but what I heard was TV Ilola, which is Greek for basically
I think the Wendigo mask I did
the
is
sudden interruption in the usual silence of the basement.
probably my favorite because
caused me to
it
jerk
took
violently
so much
in the
effort,
chair,
so much
which was an
time.
old wooden
I was
stool
really
that
I'm
should
really
have
proud of
been
that
many
one. That's
years
probably my
ago,
favorite.
and it hadn't, and my movement had caused it to break,
Other than the
causing me to fall onto the floor.
mm,
That's where I was when Al began to call for me.
the Fallout guy.
At first, I didn't understand what he was saying, given my shock.
I like that dude. I
But
like his
slowly I
teeth.
began to understand
Little,
his frantic explosion of
Those little.
words. There were numbers. He was shouting numbers at me. Sophia had taught me some basic numerals when it came to Greek. While I couldn't understand exactly what figures he was throwing at me, I did know it was dollar amounts, or rather,
What time are we at?
the currency before euros.
Well,
Even
thank
as
you,
I lay on
thank
the
you.
floor, I understood. He was back at an auction, bidding on this piece. Even with the unexpected pain of landing on the floor, I sighed.
Yeah, some of those 3D
This was
ones I
just
plan to
another
3D
part
print
of taking care of this kind
at
of
some
patient.
point.
You can almost expect to be startled at some point. You're basically sitting there trying to anticipate when your peace and quiet will be shattered.
Okay, so I gotta use this as the
I
reference.
gathered myself and stood up, collecting all the maturity and professionalism I could without bellowing, "What in the world do you want?" I then realized Al was not just out of bed, but he had somehow made his way down the creaky old stairs without me knowing. The initial anger for being thrust forcefully out of my research faded as I fell into
I got
disappointment
to use
with
Vaseline
myself
on this.
for not doing my duty as a caregiver.
Any artist I take
He was
inspiration
alone wandering
from.
the house, and I'd been completely unaware. Guilt and shame came into focus as I pulled
Simon
my
Lee
body from the floor and began to approach
is
him.
an amazing sculptor.
I cautiously tried to calm him down. He was
The
already so
Scheiflet
shocked in
brothers,
that state.
Jordu
His
Shell.
tirade of numbers, and from what I could gather,
Those are
slowly
my like
continued,
top 3 favorite.
specifically in Greek. He continued to point around the basement at his collection. His only
Tom
expression of
Savini,
concern and
of
comfort.
course. Dude's a legend.
I knew this behavior, the one of a person who is truly lost in their own mind. There was only one thing to do: play his game. So I began to placate him, telling him that it was all okay, even when I knew it wasn't. It's not a fun game to play.
But
It's not right. It's
Eric
not fair.
Sosa is another
At some
really good
point, It's
one.
the only hand you have left to play. It was some time.
But
before
I don't know
went
too many like
upstairs,
horror
and
artists,
even more before I was able to convince
artists
him
in
to go
general.
into bed.
like big
Even
ones.
as he laid down and I put the sheets over him, he was muttering vague
But
threats.
those are like the
and
main
symbols of
ones.
Greek.
That kind of got me.
He'd been getting.
Oh yeah,
worse.
Tom is just
I knew that. But
amazing.
this was a whole new version of him altogether. I made a mental note to check him in the morning for a possible UTI, knowing
Right, those-
that in his vulnerable state, it could be a reasonable explanation for his erratic behavior.
Would have been cool to go to his like school
As I
that he
tried
opened
to
up in
think, He
California.
muttered something in my direction.
It's like Tom
a sort of
Savini's
vindictiveness,
School of
a
Special
certain
Effects.
blackness to the way he said it. Lycos. With that, Al went back to bed, and I went back down to the basement to continue my work. Even with all
Like
the
that.
interruptions, I had another breakthrough. The artist's family had established a museum in Germany based on recovering their family paintings. At last, I had a solid lead. I reached out to them via email, including some pictures of the painting as well as close-up shots of the signature, including everything I'd uncovered so far. About
Lesser known artists. Grumbly is a Twitch streamer
as it was one of the few in the
that he makes like masks. I really like him.
Documentation with it.
God, I'm bad with names.
And I sat back in my chair, rubbing at my weary eyes.
I have it on my phone, actually.
I did enjoy the thrill of the hunt, so to speak. But these long nights and still attending classes during the day was really starting to wear me down. Having felt like I'd made some genuine headway that night, I decided to retire for the evening to
King Voodoo does some really cool stuff.
I made my bed while plugging in the baby monitor and fall alarms, which alert me to anything Al was doing, making sure to keep them close to the head of my bed so I'd be sure to hear them.
I
threw myself.
Forget his name, but the lead sculptor at Immortal Masks. He's
I woke up suddenly,
crazy good.
And went due. I raised up out of grass.
Total stoner guy.
My mind tried to ask
works
him
amazing.
What it was, but the thoughts slogged through what seemed to be a muck of slow comprehension.
That one guy.
As I placed my hands beneath me to pull my body into a sitting position, another sight caught my eye.
George Shell. Yeah,
I was
George
not
Shell's a
alone
big
in
one.
the field. All around were little white clouds of fluff. I managed to rise to my feet. All the little clouds.
Jay Ryan's a really good one. He does like a lot of busts and
I pulled my feet beneath me, still
creepy
a little
stuff.
woozy, and I began to walk towards them. As my feet grew damp from the grass,
How about yourself?
I realized they were sheep. The lazy clouds of fur turned their unseen heads towards me, their sleepy bass sounds escaping from the slumbering mass. Sheep. A field of sheep.
Sheep is sheepy.
I awkwardly stumbled through them in my stupor, almost but never quite tripping over the slumbering mass, until I reached the center of the flock. I stood there in the center, just turning around in place, gazing upon the mass of a dozing, restful herd, when I heard it. A sound I can only describe as primeval. It started as a low sound, but not quiet, just low.
Some amazing artists out there.
Of its tone I could feel in my most.
I'm just very bad with names.
A tone that spoke of warning, of violence, of impending physical harm. A voice from a place much older than humans that simply said, "Leave." Not a word, just a feeling. An overwhelming overtone that said,
Raphael Grassetti is a good one.
So I did. I tried to leave.
He designed the Kratos for the new God of War.
And I ran. I ran over sheep and brambles, over the fields of vines and into the forest beyond the herd.
Dude, that's cool.
I was almost past the last sleeping sheep when I heard the sound. The low, deep growl. The sound struck so deep inside me that I tripped and fell. My face was buried in leaves and dead growth. All I could smell was the dead earth buried in my nostrils. And yet I could still hear the growl. An all-encompassing noise. It sounded like it was raising the earth from beneath it. And it only spelled death. At that moment, I decided this was my fate. I turned, even in my terror, to face my
I'm dead now.
demise.
This is it.
All I could see was the dark skies above as I lay on my back. Then the full amalgamation of my nightmares came true. It came into my vision, gray and white, its full black eyes staring down at me. Its paws had pinned me to the earth, but its mouth was the most
It's been
horrible
called
part.
Distinct.
It was not dripping with blood, or even open in
From
some
Lisbon.
natural smile. It was just open, waiting for me to protest. It knew I didn't belong there, and it stood upon me waiting for me to say something so that it would answer with its primal and definite reply. I tried to raise my hands, only to find them lethargic. The beast then answered my action with a strike from its jaws. The last thing I saw was the white flash of teeth.
Oh, yeah.
My next memory was waking
Whoa.
up on the floor of Al's
That's some
house.
interesting stuff, eh?
I'd thrown myself out of my bed and was now on the floor. Terror
Very
still
cool.
flooded my mind. I fought against the teeth that had taken hold, only to find I was only fighting the blankets I'd laid down on for my own bedding. I was sitting there panting on the floor. My eyes soon adjusted to the relative darkness of the living room. The familiar surroundings came back into focus.
Yeah, I try and find new artists if
My
I
heart
can,
began to
but
explode
most of the time I'm just
until
trying
the
to
fear finally began to recede.
do my own thing.
I wasn't in a field. I was in the living room. No sheep, no wolves, no
But
threat.
I have met some
Just
pretty
a bad
great artists, some pretty nice ones here on
I tried to
Twitch.
calm myself down. Just a dream, just a dream. Too many hours.
Like I said,
with
Grumbly
this.
is really
Too
good.
many hours in the basement. Too many hours working. I lay my head down
Oh,
on the
what's his
floor,
face?
trying
Lord
my best to
Spew.
console my own mind.
He makes some weird.
When the
He makes some
panic and
weird
fear
stuff.
finally subsided somewhat, I raised my head again to look out.
Ham
into the
Slayer's really
windows
good
of
as
the
well.
house. There was no reason. I just did.
Fool's
I saw
Fox.
standing
He does some
at the
good stuff as well.
sliding
He's
window of the back
at the
room.
moment he's making some
Figure.
he's doing his own graphic novel
Shaggy,
actually.
tall and lean, the figure of a wolfhound.
It's like a type
staring
of
back
Western
at me.
sci-fi or something.
There was no malice, no evil intentions. It just stared at me with its cold black eyes. I felt my face go cold. The blood rushed away from my faculties and the edges of my vision began to darken. I put my head down on the floor, waiting for the vertigo and nausea to pass. When I lifted my head again, the figure was gone, but I swear I could see the fading remnants of breath against the pane of glass. I got up off the floor and noticed the first glimmers of dawn beginning to light up the sky. Well, I thought to myself, at least my relief will be here soon. I rubbed my eyes and began the process of setting out breakfast. The brewing coffee smelled particularly wonderful, probably due to my brain screaming for a caffeine boost.
Oh, why did I do
After the
that?
less than restful
Wait, did I
evening,
do that? Ah, I didn't do
morning
that. I should have done this
as I
texture.
heard steps
Oh,
going
well.
up the ramp to the front door. Sophia's usually cheerful demeanor changed the moment she laid eyes on me. Instead, a look of concern spread over her. I told her about the evening's events. All of them. I didn't even bother trying to rationalize any of the bizarre occurrences away. Sophie had always been a more spiritual person than myself, believing in dreams, meanings, and premonitions. Plus, I was just too tired to try
Stan
rationalizing
Winston.
any of it. She sat
Stan
at the
Winston.
table with me as I told my story between sips of
Another
coffee.
legend.
When I looked up, I was expecting perhaps a look of bewilderment, or even disbelief. I was instead greeted by a look of sympathy and understanding. "It's the wolfhound painting," she said, with no degree of doubt in her voice, just a statement of fact. That painting always gave me the creeps, and Grandpa never liked to talk about where he got it, or why it was never hung up in the house. It has always lived down there in the basement, she explained. Really, the most he has ever said about it was that it was a gift he never wanted. Her brow furrowed in concentration, trying to recall facts from days past. All I can really tell you is that he doesn't want that painting. I remember once when I was pretty little, me and some friends were playing down in the basement and I opened the cabinet where he
Type
was
of
keeping
music?
it. I took the cover off just out of
Well,
curiosity.
I love metal music. That's probably a
When he
big
came
shocker
down
to a
and
lot
saw
of people.
us, he was... The lines in her brow deepened
Um,
further, trying to find the words.
Metal,
Furious? But that's not
really
quite
like
the right
blues,
word. More like when you find a child playing with something dangerous.
rock.
He was angry, but more concerned. Like he had come across us playing
Anything
with a loaded
fast
gun.
and upbeat.
He sent my friends home immediately and sat me down at the kitchen table, telling me I must never touch the painting.
Classic
ever
rock.
again. I can still remember the sweat standing out on his forehead when he told me that. He said it was bad luck, or what word was it?
How about yourself?
Menos. That's
Look
the
at
word
it.
he used. He was never someone quick to anger, or even raise his voice.
Damn,
The
this
way
like
he
really
acted towards that
absorbs.
painting, well,
This
it always
Vaseline.
stood out for
That's
me.
crazy.
Sophia finished. I sat there in my chair, sipping my coffee, listening to her, and I felt just the slightest bit of my usual healthy dose of skepticism about the supernatural world falter ever so.
Subgenre?
Even a slight change in one's worldview has a profound effect. My own mind treated me to a fleeting vision of the dream from the night before.
I love melodic.
Those teeth.
Like Winter
No
Sun.
compassion, no mercy. Flying right at my face. I must have visibly shuddered, because Sophia broke her deep recall of the memory and regarded me.
Thrash, metal, of course.
I don't believe in curses or haunted things.
Yeah, I like the melodic
but the
metal.
painting down there, it definitely gives me the creeps.
Ice Nine Kills.
To see an expression
I really
on her
like them
face,
lately.
which said she was glad I was seeing the things she always had. I'd seen that look before. Oh, don't start, I said, getting up from the table to
too
get a
much
second cup
Vaseline.
from the pot.
That's okay.
Even as I poured my
Might
second
not be
cup, I
okay.
could feel Sophia's gaze at my back.
I dabble in everything except New Country.
For my admission,
Only been into
the
sludge metal.
circumstances
Ooh, I know,
were
sludge
full
metal.
of rationale. I returned the coffee pot to its
Recently
owner
discovered that
and
not
leaned
too long
against the
ago.
stove, turning my face once again to Sophia. This
Goth.
weakness still remained for a brief period.
Goth has some
I
good
was
stuff.
grateful to see a smile on her face, even for a
I
moment.
never really gave that a
before
chance,
concern
but
darkened her countenance again.
like beginning of the year, like I found some
Is
good
moving
goth
to
stuff.
have my grandfather conserved, she said, a touch of anger coloring her words. I broke my gaze with Sophia to put my head down and grip the bridge of my nose, knowing all too well how these kinds of
How did I do
situations tend to play out. For anyone who has had the good fortune of never working in this field, I'll try to clarify. Being conserved is a legal term. Being placed into conservatorship means that a doctor has determined you are no longer capable of making decisions for yourself,
Like Britney Spears.
and control of you and all your property and assets are handed over to the control of someone else. Oftentimes, this will be a family.
I like
or someone
sleaze metal.
designated
Sleaze metal's pretty good.
determined to have your best interests at heart.
Hardcore
and will work only in such a
superstar.
manner for you to have a favorable outcome. At
I
least
think those guys have
that's
been
how
around
it is supposed
forever.
to work in a perfect world. However, I would say even often, in situations
Crash
like these,
diet.
it has a
Another
wide
one.
potential for being abused. Sometimes leading to a family member making their own interpretations of what the conserved individual would have wanted, resulting in isolation of the conserved individual, leading to
Oh, there's some really good
frustration of
stuff.
the
Sadly, a
conserved
lot
person, and
really good
fostering
goth music
further
is
distrust among
made by
family
horrible
members.
people. Really?
As I
Ooh.
pinched the bridge of my nose,
There's some
I could
tea.
feel the pressure of a headache building. No part of that can lead anywhere good.
That sucks.
I said as much to myself as to her. I hate to put more pressure on you, Bobby, but we're running out of time, she said, trying to mask the pleading in her voice. Do you really think you can sell that painting without... She trailed off.
Can you separate like the art from the artist?
With a bit more harshness than I would have intended, if not for the lack of sleep. But if you're
And still enjoy that kind of music?
there isn't anything I can do. I'm not a lawyer or a doctor. If she gets what she wants, there's nothing more I can help with. I expected her face to once again darken at this new development, but instead a small light grew within her expression. My mother has a solution to that exact problem, she said, beaming. We are giving the painting to you, for the time being, until it is sold. You will have temporary ownership of the painting as drawn up with the paperwork with the intent to sell it on our behalf. Temporary stewardship.
Definitely try to. I
I
don't
could see she was proud of the work
think
she and her
differently
mother
of
had
anyone
done to
who
make this
does.
possible.
Sometimes I
They'd
just...
found a workaround for the aunt's drive to have Al conserved.
Yeah, I get that. I get
This
that.
made it possible for me to continue to help them, albeit for just a short time longer. Sophia's mother arrived at the house a short time later, handing me paperwork that must have taken several trees to produce. Reams of documents and legal forms, all of which had to be signed and initialed.
It's a lot of
She
big
gave me a
bands
satisfied but still cautious look.
that are like
and
that, you know?
said, Now we get the go-ahead.
It's like they did what? Ooh,
Stay here until you hear from me, she said with an emotionless expression, and promptly went upstairs to her father's room. Sophia nodded and followed her mother upstairs.
How?
I sat in the kitchen alone, contemplating my overall choices in life that had led me to this particular event for some time. before Sophia appeared at the landing of the stairs. She beckoned me to join them. As I ascended the stairs, I could hear their argument. It was all in Greek, so my understanding was limited, but not completely without some comprehension. I heard the painting mentioned several times along with words.
It's like actors, you know?
Meant outsider.
Like a lot of stuff has been coming out about
And what I took to mean
actors and how some of the more popular ones might be a little terrible.
Outlandish. He was having a good morning of lucidity. I suppose it's why they chose now to do what they had to do, rather than later in the day when his mind might slip.
But I mean, I feel like you could
Sophia
still
opened the door to his room and invited me inside.
enjoy certain work even
I took
though
a deep breath and followed
they
her
might
in.
not be the greatest.
Al
Unless it's like really
was
heinous shit, then
actually well composed, given the
it's like,
circumstances.
yeah, no, I'm not gonna
He
I'm not
greeted
gonna
me
support
with
that.
Not so much as a frown, but more the look of a judge looking upon a condemned man. So my daughter tells me you wish to take possession of the wolfhound, he said, with no tremble or hesitation in his voice that had been trademarked of the last few weeks. Yes, sir, with the purpose of selling it for you and your family, I calmly remarked, without meeting his gaze. Again, eye contact for me is not something I can do easily. Look at me, boy.
Got a band
He
called
said,
Radio
a sharp
Werewolf.
tone unlike
Got
the
outed
man
for
I'd
being
known.
fascist back in the
Even
90s.
through the trepidation, I
Which is so
decided
good.
to meet his eyes, and was shocked at what I found. His stare was even, no trace of stroke or dementia. His eyes were firm and
I mean, hey,
steadfast.
I mean,
He looked
Pantera,
upon me with real concern,
you know,
and even,
they,
I dare say, compassion.
had their stuff, right?
Very well.
Especially
You
with
take
the
it
lead
easy,
singer
Rose.
being a Nazi.
Give me your hand. Sir? I
But
said.
I still listen to
Give
their
me
stuff.
your
It's just
hand.
good. I
He
don't
repeated.
support
Instead, he offered me his hand outstretched and reached
his
for my hand.
ideals or anything, but
I gave Sophie and Mary a wayward glance, asking their permission. Mary nodded towards me.
it's just good.
Sophie gave me a look that only described her confusion and wariness.
I probably don't like it as much
He
anymore,
shook
but
Al's liver-spotted, withered hand.
you're like Cowboys from Hell, be like, oh yeah, this is good too.
I agree. With that, he grasped my hand. The family waited in
Fuck
silence.
off, man. Many ones from the 80s and early 90s tend to be the fascists or very racists.
My skepticism about the supernatural,
That's upsetting.
about all things mystic and foreign to my rational
Racism,
mind,
not good.
slipped another cog on the wheel. It felt as if
Excuse-
something real and certain was transferred from him to me just then. This was not
Can we all just get along?
not an awakening nor a spiritual calling. More a dread. A deep feeling of what I would call at the time responsibility. But it felt more like a burden, like impending doom. Something that felt like having to put on an executioner's hood. With that,
Yeah, that's
he put
not-
his hand away, and Alfred breathed. Not that he took a breath.
I like this
The
band. You
moment
know they're
he
racist.
left mine, he inhaled more deeply
Well,
than I'd seen him do in some months. and
maybe I don't
lifted
like
his
him
head
that much.
And deflated his chest, relaxing his posture. He
But this
seemed to
too,
have
it is
a
great.
profound sense of relaxation. At that moment, I thought he had died. His face became so relaxed.
Then you start thinking, it's like, well, what's the meaning behind this song
He
then?
had lost since his
Oh.
diagnosis. I paused for a moment, believing that Al had passed from the world, only to be surprised when he shot up in bed and nearly knocked me to the floor in his newfound exuberance. He exclaimed, "El my eleftheros," before falling back into his bed. I would later learn this meant, "I am free," or some form of that. I looked back and forth between Sophia and Mary from my newfound position of confoundment on the ground, looking for any kind of meaning or explanation. The blank expressions faced towards me gave me nothing but more questions. So I accepted this and tried my best to rise in a somewhat dignified fashion, which honestly was more of an awkward stumble. I faced Sophie and her mother, offering the only question I could utter at the time. Now what?
Thanks.
As it turns out, the painting was far too large to fit in my little hatchback. So after several attempts and much use of a tape measure, Sophia agreed to let me use her station wagon
Gosh darn it.
to transport the painting to my own home. I lived alone in a studio apartment in one of the worst neighborhoods of my town.
I mean, you know, if we
I'm not
like,
kidding when I say it's one of the worst.
I don't know, what do I want to say? Like, judged.
TV crime dramas. Gunfire is just
If we
background
judged
noise, and you
every
don't
like
bother
band
looking
or
around because it
actor and
just
all
means
that,
they'll break your
shit they
windows.
believed or did,
Like I said, it's bad.
well, I don't think
But my apartment building does have a gate out front
we'd like
and a
anything.
small temporary parking area. That is where Sophia and I wrestled that painting out of her Subaru. And
I believe you can, like,
of my building. After some
still
time,
enjoy
it
somebody's
was
art,
in
you
my
know,
apartment.
separate the art from the artist.
My apartment was an older building.
That's
It
my
still had
belief.
a dressing area
But like I
outside the
said,
bathroom, with small
I guess it's to an
shutter doors
extent.
separate it from the rest of my artist's studio. I decided that's where the painting would live until I sold it. That way I wouldn't have to see it every day. Thank you, Sophie. I panted as I thrust the huge painting into my closet. Sweat had begun to
Sludge
settle.
metal and goth is mainly
Light rain
where I've
had
been,
begun
and I'm slowly starting to get into death metal.
No problem,
Death metal?
she
Doom.
said.
Ah, Doom, not for
The
me.
expression was plain on her
I've
face as
tried.
well, and like me, she was trying to hide it. Sophia took a moment to collect herself, then said,
I've
"I'm
tried.
sure you want this thing here."
Just so I get back into those genres, I've always dabbled in it, never
Then
fully
felt a
got it.
surge of
Okay, yeah.
bravery as I replied,
I love death metal.
"Yeah,
Death metal's
why
great.
not?" I
Doom,
tried my
not
best
for me.
to not
Black
sound
metal.
so scared of the thing, and
Black
everything
metal, not
else.
for me either.
I just mean it. She started. Stop. it,"
Melodic
I
death
said,
metal?
trying my best.
Anything
to seem
melodic,
like I had
I
a
guess.
clue as to what I was doing. It's just a painting, Sophie. No more, no less.
Stoner
I'll
metal.
sell this awful thing and get you guys some money
Like some
to help
stoner
pay for
metal.
all the expenses you've endured. She stopped and looked at me. Though eye contact was never my forte, a direct glance with real meaning from Sophia was something else altogether. She had a way of looking right through you, and it felt like a
Bands I
spark
really
in my
enjoy.
eyes. I couldn't lie to her. Ever.
I really enjoy Ice Nine
She then
Kills.
asked, "Do you believe me yet?
I
Do you believe in what I've seen?"
I enjoy this artist.
When
It's
she
not
said
metal or
that, the
anything,
last cogs of my finely
but
crafted
it's like-
layers of skepticism broke. Sophia,
it's almost like Halloween-y
I know
music.
what's happening.
It's creature feature.
Good. It means you're not stupid, she said, with no note of smugness.
It's
or
almost
fear.
like a
Just me.
Broadway,
fact.
not Broadway, almost
Which,
like a
as man
play,
who has
but
always
it's not a
held to
play.
those
But the
beliefs,
music's similar
struck
to a
me
play.
deeply. The tone of her
But it's just
voice
so
was
good.
cold and irrefutable,
But
so
that's
I
not
smiled.
metal, but still really
It
good.
means something, I said, the words lying heavy on my heart. I just don't know exactly what yet.
Lunar Sea is another
It's a
one
start,
I've been
she
into.
said. And without another word,
Made
she
of
left my
Hate.
apartment, leaving me alone in silence.
Some of these
I
are like
stared
older
out the
ones.
door as she closed it, wondering to myself what exactly in the heck I'd gotten myself into. Wariness found its way into the forefront of my thoughts and made itself quite a nice home there. I just needed some food and sleep, which were the only thoughts my mind had for me. I walked over to the fridge and opened it, examining the contents inside, hoping for anything that might
Now
resemble a
need
meal.
to do the other part.
I was in luck tonight. I had some chicken breast and vegetables, courtesy of my meal delivery service, that I had just
Yeah,
ordered
look
from my
into 'em.
bank
Let me know what you
not to
think.
cancel.
If you have
I
any
just waited
suggestions, I'm always
in
looking for new
silence,
bands to listen to as
expressing
well.
whatever gratitude I could for the powers that be. I had managed to bring my laundry up from the basement, clean sheets and bedding for the night to come. It was my Friday, and even though I had a lot of work ahead of me, I was thankful for clean bedding and a chance at a good night's sleep. Before retiring for the evening, I forced myself to go and check the mail. My mailbox was stuffed with the usual array of coupons, local ads, and junk mail, offering me promises of millions if I just signed up for their mailing list.
I wish.
Upon clearing through the refuse, I saw at the bottom of my mailbox a package key. Curious, I took it and went over to the locked parcel bins, trying to remember if I had ordered anything recently. I opened the bin, and there was a slim bubble envelope. Turning it over, I tried to figure out the address.
Dax Riggs.
All I could really tell was that it came from somewhere in Germany.
Sounds. It
I
rings a
pulled the
bell.
strip off, reaching
Riggs.
inside and pulling out a book. Then the light bulb came on. It was from the Museum of the Painter. Along with the book was a note from the curator expressing keen interest in the painting, as it could be part of a missing collection assumed destroyed during the Second World War. Signed at the bottom was some contact information if I wished to continue the authentication with the museum. Yes, I most certainly do, I said aloud. I went back up to my apartment.
Oh, acid bath?
To have some reading material before bed.
I've heard of acid
It might
bath.
help me further this project down the road. And I thought to myself, get that painting out of my apartment. As I lay in bed trying my best to pore over a few pages of the book, my eyelids continued their efforts downward.
Dog's roots.
And before long, I just couldn't argue with them anymore. Sleep came for me, and I was its all too willing captive. When my eyes opened again, upon the field of slumbering,
Have to give him a listen.
it wasn't met with a sense of dread. Instead, I found myself looking upon the field with something more like determination. The shouts emanating from my rational mind faded, giving way to a sense of purpose.
That's just a badass
I took in
name.
every detail in the
James
entire
Dax
field all
Riggs.
at once.
Damn, that's hardcore. I
The
love
field of stars shone brightly overhead, but no moonlight. Despite this, I could see my surroundings in clear detail. My vision was crystal clear. My field. It was a faraway question that just came to me. Since when was this my field? I pushed away the thought and rose to my feet. I sauntered among the sleeping prey as they slept. My work is to protect them. They're vulnerable. I watch over them. Wait, what? Came that distant
Wormwitch.
voice again.
Stormkeep.
And once more I pushed it aside, returning to my duties.
Wormwitch. That sounds
As I
familiar.
walked by, the sheep moved around me, giving way to my presence. My job is to stand watchful over them. My
Oh, what was that?
A dreadful bleating came from the other side of the pasture. An alarm had been sounded.
I just found a band the other day. Oh, what were
I
they
took off
called?
across the open field faster than I could believe my legs would carry me.
Music.
Arriving at the far side, I witnessed sheep moving away from the border of their enclosure, close to a large willow tree that marked the edge of my territory.
Oh, wait. My library. I think I
I
saved them.
sniffed the air.
Bog
Then a
Monkey.
small voice came.
Bog Monkey.
Why am I sniffing the
Check
air?
them out. Just found them on
I
YouTube the other
forced it
day.
down to a quiet murmur, and I caught a scent on the mild breeze.
Very like
A musky odor.
what,
The scent of
spongy.
days, the
Like,
smell of
ugh.
dried blood. The smell of a predator. Then out of the woods near the border, they appeared. 3 black forms moving silently toward the fence.
Like that.
Wolves. My enemy.
Wolves.
Those things I was born to kill. I broke into a sprint. They closed the distance on the fence. The first leapt into the air, hoping to clear its boundary, but I knew what they were doing and leapt into the air to meet him. Moments before our collision, our eyes locked. He saw me and I saw him. His body tried to change direction.
Oh, there's
only
some
making
tinfoil
slightly
showing. I gotta
move
cover that
forward.
up.
My jaws opened, looking for a throat. Just before our bodies collided in the air, a new sound emerged. Not wails or cries, but something different. Something alien. The far-off voice returned, saying,
Yeah, I'll be sure to check
"Is that a horn?"
the bands you mentioned as well.
The sounds of
Got a
shattering
couple of them
glass and rending metal
saved on the
from what had been a peaceful slumber.
Spotify.
The echoes of a scream faded into the sound of my alarm clock. As I chastised myself for forgetting to turn off my alarms on my day off, I realized with the rising alarm, I didn't have the dexterity to turn off my phone's alarm because my hands were shaking too much.
Some of these around.
Memories of the dream came filtering in short bursts of vision. What the heck was that about? I wondered. I steadied my hand and was able to put an end to the offending sound.
Ah,
My adrenaline hadn't yet worn off, so I sat there in bed, trying to shake off sounds I'd heard but didn't really hear. I looked down at my phone lying.
Vaseline helps.
The time read
It's super
4:05
Sculpey stick
in the
to the baked
evening. On a
Sculpey.
regular workday, this would be a welcome reminder.
It's not just for fun, I
Start
swear.
getting ready for work. But today
just
on
for
my
fun,
day
people.
off, it had me wondering how much it would cost to replace this phone if I decided to toss the annoying little thing out of the nearest window. let it join the other refuse near the dumpsters on my side of the building. I lay back on my pillow, staring up at the
Sometimes you
ceiling,
put too much on and
wondering
it
if I
just
could go
slides
back to
around.
sleep, when my phone chimed. Once again, the device's fate was called into question. Before I decided to expedite the phone's temporary existence in my reality, I checked my notifications. Sophia, with a note marked urgent. Okay then, I thought. This is worth checking on. I opened the message. It was a voice message.
Now we
The
smooth it all
voice was
out.
not as sharp as it could be, but from Sophia's tone, I could tell the message was truly urgent. I hit pause and restarted the message from the beginning, more awake than before. Bobby, please call me. There's been an accident.
It's a barber.
Sophia's
A
tears
Sculpey?
streamed
Yeah, I've
down
been
her
lurking a bit.
stomach and into
I
her
thought it
cheeks.
was foam clay.
I
No.
called her back as fast as my abilities
It's
would
a
allow.
it's Sculpey.
Hello, Sophie. What's happening?
Sculpey white
Her response
mixed
was not
with
simple.
Sculpey Primo green.
My aunt was on her way to her lawyer's office.
Local
With all
band
the
that I've been
papers
trying to
and
catch
power of
live show
attorney, she
just
was
went
trying to get herself to
inactive
court.
last month, right
However,
after I started looking. Oh no.
But then her car
They break
crashed
up?
into a tree.
Hope not.
She was taken by ambulance. Her daughter and her fiancé were in the car with her. She's at St. Mary's in critical condition. The staff there tell us we should get there soon. Bobby, what does that mean?
Though I have used foam clay, that
This is the very
That
worst
stuff's hard
part
to
of my
work with.
job. I told them the truth. You should definitely go to the hospital. Sophia went quiet. She knew what that meant. Go. Be with me,
original white. Sculpey
I
3
said,
white.
into an empty line.
Use a sculpt with
Sophia
original
had
gray.
already left the
I
conversation.
took it
to
off
go
the
meet
market
her
and replaced it
family.
with stone. Oh, okay.
I would have liked to go down and offer
Yeah,
my
Sculpey
condolences
3
to them,
white.
but I knew all too well my presence would only cause them more problems, very well stirring the already tense members of a family in crisis. Her aunt
This dude
lived, but she spent
is made
several
from
tense
Sculpey
days in the
Primo,
ICU and
but I couldn't
died
find any
in
more.
twice.
So I have to use
I kept
Sculpey
up my
3
caregiving
mixed
duties
with
morale as
the
best
smaller
I could
packets of
during this
Primo.
time. However,
Excuse
someone
me.
in the family had told him what had happened. While his mental state was always a bit touch and go,
Mm.
adding emotional stress on top of it always makes conditions like this worse. He would ask me if I'd heard any news, only to forget anything he was told by me or anyone else moments later. Other family members would call and remind him of what had happened, much to my objection. I would be forced to watch as he took the news over and over again, as if it was his first time hearing it. This grief spiraling continued for days, until his daughter's condition finally stabilized.
Well, thank you.
Mary was able to retake control of the family.
Yeah, we just
She
gotta do
said their
the
incessant,
claws,
monthly torturous contact
attach
was
them,
real.
bake them,
Cases
and
such
then
as
get to
ours
the
were frequently
painting.
the most heartbreaking because of these circumstances.
and we might be done.
Grief and worry take time to process, and his condition robbed him of the ability to ever have that time. Over the next few days, the museum and I continued our email exchange. More pictures of the author's signature, as well as what my intentions were to do with said painting. They'd begun with trying to get me to simply donate the painting to the museum. I
Not
attempted to
donating
explain the
this.
situation for them, why I'd been doing all this work, and the family I was attempting to
Be
benefit.
like, pay me money.
This got a more sharply worded response from the museum, trying to lecture me about the historical importance of returning lost pieces to their original owners. But I knew this tactic. It was pretty commonly used in art deals, to see if they could get you to give up valuable pieces of artwork for pennies, or even nothing at all. It was a sleazy tactic.
You read.
I began to more closely examine our emails.
Man, if I had like a painting worth
I found that
$1 billion,
hadn't actually been with the
I wouldn't be
museum,
donating. I'd be like,
but a
pay me.
third-party art dealer working on the museum's behalf.
pay me.
I fired back a furious email accusing the art dealer of misrepresenting themselves and demanded to be placed in contact with an actual curator of the museum's collections. I'd scattered enough fear-inducing legal language throughout the email to get the dealer to back off, and I was put into touch with their real acquisitions department. After CCing them all of my previous emails with the art dealer, I was offered an extremely well-worded apology, along with what I'd been working for this whole time. A genuine offer. I won't lie, When I opened the email containing their offer on the painting, I was taken aback. It was, to say the least, generous. I printed the email, and when Mary arrived that morning, I handed her the offer letter. I stood in the kitchen with her, a little off to the side, trying to casually sip my coffee. I felt an immense pride swell up inside me, watching her usually serious eyes soften. She put her hand over her mouth, and tears began to well. "Is this real?"
Okay.
she asked. "Yes," I said, softly. "All they need is your signature and mine. They'll make all the arrangements to have it shipped to the museum." If the offer letter had me taken aback, what happened next pretty well knocked me off my feet. Mary got up from the table and hugged me so fiercely, I honestly thought she might break one of my ribs. She put her head down on my chest, and I could feel a few silent sobs before she reimagined her composure. "Thank you for everything you've done for my family," she said, with genuine gratitude in her voice. All right, then my turn to shed a few tears, I thought. We hugged again, this time without trying to squeeze me in two. We sat together in the kitchen for the next hour, while I worked on our electronic signatures, and she made a variety of phone calls to family trust lawyers and accountants. Mary and I had the painting picked up from my house, instead of bringing it back to Al's for the sake of not wanting any more calls to upset her father. To my surprise, it wasn't just some courier that came to package up the painting for shipping. It was an actual staff member of the museum. They'd flown out all the way from Germany to personally deliver the check to Mary and oversee the painting's final departure. He was a tall, lean man with a deceptively deep voice. He extended his hand to mine, once he had ensured all reasonable precautions had been taken for its safe travel. "Thank you for bringing this treasured piece back to its home," he said, grasping my hand in a firm grip. As he shook my hand, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, like a dread I'd been trying to ignore since this entire debacle began had finally been lifted. I actually felt lighter for it. The family decided to have a party to celebrate. With the sale, Mary had enough to hire a caregiving staff to give Al the best care he could possibly have, secure his home, and all in all just settle out the infighting that had plagued the family when this all began. I don't know if you've ever been to a big Greek family party, but they're quite the event. I was invited and greeted by faces that had once held only suspicion for me, but now held a regard for me like when Mary had embraced me in the kitchen. Basically, I was treated like part of the family. Drinks flowed and they all conversed in such a way that told me all the misgivings had been forgiven. Even Al was present. I caught sight of him sitting in a large, comfy-looking recliner, playing with his grandkids. As I looked on, I couldn't help but notice something slightly different about him. Something about how he moved with a little less stiffness, which had been afflicting him before. I could have sworn that his salt and pepper hair had a bit more pepper than salt since I'd last seen him. Sophia's aunt was in a wheelchair with a broken leg, and her arm was in a cast, but she was in just as good of spirits as any of the group. She wheeled up to me along with her fiancé and her daughter. It made me glad to see that they were all okay. She began to thank me for everything, which at this point I was getting tired of saying "of course" or "you're welcome." It had been happening pretty much all night with every family member I talked to. She asked which of the paintings I'd sold to make them so fortunate. I told her, but she said she wasn't familiar with it. I pulled up the photos from my laptop, and all three of them looked down. "Mommy," her daughter exclaimed, pointing at the wolfhound in the photo. I don't know what it is about children. Something about how innocent they are that gives them the ability to say the most bone-chilling things. "That's the doggy that ran in front of our car." I could feel the blood make a hasty retreat from my face. Her mother looked at her and said, "Don't tell stories." "I'm not," she whined in protest. The fiancé took the back of the wheelchair, beginning to wheel her aunt away. "Come on, let's get some food," he said. I was left alone with their daughter for just a moment. She looked up at me with her enormous brown eyes. "You believe me, don't you?" I knelt down so only she could hear me. You know what, kiddo? I really do, I told her, and seemingly satisfied with my answer, she turned to go after her mother. When I stood back up and turned, I found Sophia standing directly behind me. You believe her, huh? She said, with that same satisfied smirk. I rolled my eyes at Sophia, but she knew. Come on, my mom has something for you, she said, taking my hand and leading me through the crowd to the less occupied front porch. Mary stood there with a few glasses of ouzo. While Sophia poured, Mary handed me a slip of paper. What's this? I asked. Your commission, she said flatly. Oh, I can't, I started, before she cut me off. You can and you will, she said, with that undeniable tone that told me saying no was no option. She pushed the check into my hands, along with the glass. Now drink, and finish your art school. She finished and raised her glass. Honestly, I might want to change majors, I said, making Sophia shoot ouzo out of her nose. When I got home that night, with help from a taxi, I was so ready for a night in my own bed, especially now that the dreadful painting was out of my apartment. I thanked the cab driver, which may have had a bit of slurring in it, and
You like Bog Monkey? Yeah, they're pretty good, eh?
I had, of course, been forced to take a ton of leftovers with me.
I love like a good find like that, you know.
Changed into my night clothes and snuggled into my bed. Ouzo is very good at making you sleepy. I drifted off. Once again, I opened my eyes in that darned field. But it wasn't dark. It was sunset. And I wasn't inside the fence anymore. I was leaning on the outside of it. The pasture had a feeling of tranquility my previous encounters had not. I looked out at the sheep, making their little baa noises. From within the herd, I saw it. The wolfhound. It emerged in all its gray, shaggy presence. But now there was no malice, no hateful black eyes. It was just a large sheepdog doing its job. It regarded me for a moment and made a sort of sneezing, chuffing noise in my general direction, before walking off into the sunset to guard its flock. That was the last time I saw it, and the dream that night. Well, actually, there was one more time. I read that book that the museum had sent me. Towards the end, there were photos of the artist with his family, back when he was but a young boy. In one, the large family stood very well dressed for a family portrait. There in the middle was the painter as a child, with his little arms wrapped around the neck of an enormous wolfhound. Thanks for tuning in to Tales from the Break Room, the home of the scariest true work stories. If you want to hear your story narrated by me, send it to me at eeriecast.com/submit. We pay 5 cents per word for accepted stories. Help us grow by leaving Tales from the Break Room a rating and review on Spotify and Apple.
Oh, you said you weren't a fan of doom metal. Sounds pretty doomy.
Podcast app. Check out eeriecast.com or search for Eerie.
Maybe I am a fan. Maybe just specific doom metal. I don't know. But I like Bog Monkey.
Unexplained Encounters, the other show I host, where I read stories with a focus on the supernatural. To get some merch, go to
Probably the first doom metal that I like that.
And to unlock ad-free episodes of your favorite EerieCast shows.
Okay, so
Go to
these need to sit.
eeriecast.com/plus and consider signing up for EerieCast Plus. You can follow me on Twitter, I guess it's X now, at Dark Prevails. You can also subscribe
more.
on YouTube, where I deliver the same content. Just look for Darkness Prevails.
That's up. That's
Good night. I hope we can share another break sometime.
Oh
soon.
gosh, man, so much baking. Alright, I gotta remember to put in the knuckle, as they say. Afterwards.
I can't wait, because mine and Carmen Carrion's new book,
Okay.
Folklore, Terrifying Tales of the World's Most Elusive Monsters and Enigmatic Send your. Sometimes the dark side of fate.
All right. Yo, thanks for hanging out tonight, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed the art. We made some progress with these claws. 2 done. Got 2 more to go. We'll be back Friday. Where we'll continue. We'll probably finish the sculpt Friday, honestly. Yeah. Thanks again for the follows. Have access. Appreciate that. I'll definitely check out the music that you recommended. Can't wait to listen to some new stuff. So y'all have a great night, and I'll see you Friday. Okay? Dun, 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 dun.